Oh, good morning. Good morning. Oh, it is. There's Richard. Good morning, everyone. New facilities, new buildings. Where's our IT? Are they behind there? Oh, hello. You're behind there. Were you almost ready to go? All right, fine. So for those who have not been here before, which includes myself, it's the middle button, not the green, the yellow, or the red. There's a button below that with the speaking, if you need to, and the light comes on. We are now past 10 o'clock. Are you okay there? Yeah, no, fine. Okay. At the moment, we're missing Edna and Angela. Are you coming forward at a later stage, Angela? You actually got a seat. All right, fine. Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Can I draw the meeting to the beginning, to start? Morning, Darryl, everybody. We're ready to go. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the Combined Authorities Board meeting on the 20th of the 9th. Coming for the first time with my experience as Chair, from Peterborough City Council. So thank you for the invitation to bring the board here today. I'm grateful for all of you for making it through the various challenges to get here today, and also like to welcome those members of the public and press who are joining us virtually for part of the Combined Authority Board meeting. There are no fire drills scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we will leave the building by the nearest exit and assemble in the High Street. There is a reminder to all of you present that the public session of this meeting will be live streamed and a recording will be placed on the Combined Authorities website. Can I please ask everyone to turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? As always, I welcome and value all the views of all board members during our debates. I do, though, reserve the right to exercise my discretion as Chair during the course of the meeting to determine the time permitted for speeches and the number of speeches to be made by any member or officer in order to manage the meeting efficiently. I'd also like to add, I appreciate there's a new way that this has been set up. It does feel quite, I hope, not too confrontational that you're all here looking at us. So I hope we can foster a sense of togetherness through the discussions. Moving on to item 1. Would the Head of Democratic Services let us know of any apologies?
Thank you, Mayor. We have apologies today from Councillor Bridget Smith and we have Councillor John Williams here substituting. I've also been advised that both Darryl Preston and Councillor Sarah Comboy need to leave by 1 p.m. Okay,
so first of all, welcome to John. Thank you for subbing. And I'm also just going to make a quick note to say hello to Al Kingsley, Chair of the Business Board, and I think for the first time sitting at the board meeting. I'm sure we'll come to that at a later stage. Thank you. Does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest, pecuniary interest, in any items being considered today? Nope. As always, those declarations of interest can be made at any point during the meeting. Item 2 on the agenda is an important update on Combined Authority Board and Committee memberships. So following the review of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on Monday, that committee has now ratified their appointments of rapporteurs for the 3 thematic committees. The rapporteurs for the 3 committees are as follows: Skills and Employment, Councillors Judith Rippeth and Andy Coles; Environment and Sustainable Communities, Councillors Martin Hassel and Mark Goldsack; Transport and Infrastructure, Councillors Aidan van der Veer and John Niche. Now, these appointments do not need the approval from this board, but it is good to have them formally noted to show support for the work they will carry out. That is work shadowing the work of the thematic committees so that they can feed back to the Overview and Scrutiny on any areas that they may wish to scrutinise in more depth. The report itself asks us to note a temporary change to the Cambridgeshire County Council substitute on the Transport and Infrastructure Committee last week, born of a sudden change in a councillor's circumstances, and to formally note the appointment of Al Kingsley, as I mentioned, as a member of this Combined Authority Board following his appointment as Business Board Chair last month. Do we have any further updates to note that have been notified since publication of the report?
Thank you, Mayor. We do have a temporary change to the Labour substitute for the HR committee on the 27th of September, with Councillor Simon Smith substituting for that meeting.
Okay, I will look forward to seeing Simon there for that committee. Does anyone have any questions regarding those changes as outlined? We will then move on. We've been asked to note this report, which we have done. No vote is required. Item 3, minutes. Is the board happy to approve the minutes from the 26th of July 2023 as an accurate record and to note the action log? I see no objections, so we will take the minutes as approved. I will sign them and the action log as noted. As item 4 is petitions, and on this occasion we have received no petitions for this meeting, so I will move on to public questions, item 5. Here we have received one question in advance of this meeting. The question will be read out by Alison, our Head of Democratic Services, as the questioner is not able to be here in person.
Thank you, Mayor. This question is from Rod Hart, who's with the Cambridge and Peterborough Climate Action Coalition. In the years 2022 to 2025, a total of £435,000 is proposed to be spent on 5 EV officers split across Cambridgeshire County Council, Peterborough City Council and the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. There is also a £23,000 consultancy budget. My question is this: what on earth will those 5 officers be doing for £435,000, and why do we need to pay for external consultancy as well?
First of all, I have a prepared response, which I will read out in a moment, but I just want to acknowledge, I think it's important that members of the public, Mr. Hart, actually does question that we're getting value for money, and I have to confess myself, when I saw the question, I thought, it's a good question. You know, this is money that we were looking at to go forward with an important policy development, and we want to make sure we do get value for money. I have been reassured by my officer team, and I'll now read out the report as I've been given. The £435,000 was allocated and successfully awarded as part of the Levi Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Capability Fund. The Levi Capability Fund is available to Tier 1 local authorities in England and can be used to finance the staff and expertise needed to deliver EV infrastructure with the aim of increasing the capacity and capability of every Tier 1 local authority to plan and deliver EV infrastructure, and enabling every Tier 1 local authority to have a published EV infrastructure strategy. I am delighted to say that the Combined Authority is working in collaboration with Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council, and they were asked to identify how the funding would be used to increase their capability to deliver that important electrical vehicle infrastructure. It is of real importance that an EV officer is provided for each area. Cambridgeshire County Council, Peterborough City Council and the CPCA will undertake in collaboration with those authorities the following activities: finalising the EV strategy, establishing EV infrastructure governance, training, engagement, the constituent councils, members, public and other key stakeholders like yourself, Mr. Hart. Market testing, development of a 5-year delivery plan and scheme development, procurement, documents CPCA-wide and with the County Council and the City Council. And most importantly, staff capacity to deliver installed and commissioned charging infrastructure. And with that, the follow-up of Levi Capital Fund business case, working towards that application for a capital fund of £5,437,000. Yes, there is a need for an external consultancy pot of funding, and it's planned for work we are unable to carry out in-house. This will only be utilised as we move through the project as it is needed. Work this is likely to include is the GIS mapping software and database development, site selection software, and branding. I hope this makes it clear that although it does seem like a lot of money, a lot of thought, a lot of cooperation has gone into making this business case work, and the money does offer good value for money. More information on the Levi Capability Fund can be found at a link provided on the report that will be on the website. Thank you again for the question. Moving forward, and item 6, a forward plan. Are there any questions or comments, or can we take that as approved from the forward plan? Thank you. We have to vote. Those in favour of the current forward plan? Oh, I don't have to get first and second, do I? Yeah. All right, I'm proposing it. I need a seconder from my deputy. Those in favour of the current forward plan? Unanimous. Okay. Okay, moving on to some positivity, and I appreciate there is a very long agenda here, so both this item 7 and item 8, although very important in terms of the ongoing direction and forward thinking of the organisation, I am told both Rob and Angela are understanding of the need for some brevity whilst we need to move on to other important factors, but by no means negates how important the highlights report is. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Mayor, and morning to everybody. I'm conscious of the length of the meeting, and I'm as excited as I am to present the Chief Exec's highlights report. I'm not sure it's as important as some of the other items you need to discuss. There's a few points I just wanted to bring to life. So I think, importantly, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough is in a different position, as we know, to other parts of the country with local enterprise partnerships, and you'll see within the report that areas with LEPs have now had confirmed funding for next year and the arrangements, and for us in Cambridge and Peterborough we're just pressing and have written to the Minister to make sure that those types of arrangements actually happen in places that are already ahead of the current future direction of LEPs. You'll also see that the APPG took place on skills a little while ago, and it was really important to focus on the success of ARU Peterborough, an FE cold spot, and the importance of continuing to progress the future of the university. A lot of work's now taking place as a combined authority on behalf of you all in terms of what might the autumn statement mean to combined authorities, but also to the public sector, looking at where we need to influence and talk to government in terms of the future direction. And that also feeds into the progress on devolution. And the information we have is that the autumn statement should still have included some sort of framework statement from the Secretary of State. Equally, some members around this table know Cambridge 2040 progresses through the delivery group work. We're expecting to hear more about what that will mean for the region and the area, and obviously Greater Cambridge. The Mayor introduced, obviously, our new Chair of the Business Board, Al, so thank you for Al. And actually, I think Al would like to just say a few words, so I'm going to hand over to Al to say a few words on behalf of the Business Board.
Thank you, Rob. Morning. Fortunately, I know most of you because I always felt the most important starter for 10 was to reach out and engage. And I think in the spirit of that, the Business Board has been in operation for some years and has got some really strong projects that it can show real impact and evidence from. But the landscape is changing. The role of the Business Board as part of our growth and change within the governance structures of the combined authority, I mean, for me, that the Business Board is in a really important point to adapt in the way that it can support all of the strands within the combined authority. And I think that means tighter integration with the ways that we look at investment and opportunities for growth that dovetail with some of the key strategic priorities that we have. So my saying hi today is really to say that I think the Business Board is absolutely keen to further develop relationships with all of our fellow members here at on the board, but more broadly with all of the stakeholders, particularly business stakeholders, community groups across the region. So please take this as an open invitation to reach out, and thank you.
Thank you, Al. And then the final thing that I wanted to mention is, having seen there was some interest in a particular paragraph in the local media, it made me read again and see whether actually my style of writing may be not so helpful to access to the reader, and read it again, and I actually agree. So I think really importantly, Future Fens Adaptation Task Force, and there were some views about what does that all mean and what is that piece of work. So I thought what's important here is just to bring that to life within the board today. And I think ultimately for the combined authority area, main focus in there. This is led by Anglian Water, Environment Agency, and other agencies are involved, combined authority councils. But most importantly, what's key in there is what happens with Fens Reservoir and taking forward that piece of work, which actually, as we know, water scarcity and challenges around water for development and growth, the right development and growth across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough is really important. So it's an important task force. There's a lot of work to be done, and we're not the lead agency in it, but it is important for the future of the area. I'll close there in terms of the report. If there's any questions, I will, as always, do my best to answer them.
Thank you, Rob. Brief, but very important, and thank you for the written report. Are there any questions for Rob as CEO? Oh, John, do you want to come in?
Very briefly, Rob, paragraph 7.4 on bus reform. It'd be good if we could sort of try and just deepen some of the conversations with the health sector on both around patients and also around workforce. So I think we're keen to have that conversation. So if we could just sort of note that, something we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to pick up a conversation with you and your team around that.
There are no more questions. As it's been a thing to note, we have noted, and we will move on. That then takes us to Angela Probert, our Interim Director of the Transformation Programme, to introduce a report. Thank you, Angela. Pages 59 to 73. So that's
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. The improvement report summarises the progress against the key areas of concern by the best value notice and the external auditor for the period July and August. Full details for each of the improvement themes are set out in the highlight report, which are appended to the main report. And just for the board to note, the report has been considered by Overview and Scrutiny, Audit and Governance, and also the Independent Improvement Board. Overall, the programme is rated as green, and through the improvement group, the corporate management team colleagues continue to ensure that key deliverables are on track and risks and dependencies are managed. Paragraph 2.3 to 2.7 of the report sets out the key deliverables for the period, and I believe that these demonstrate the substantial and also focused activity taking place by a large number of colleagues from across the combined authority, but also constituent councils. Indeed, reports on the agenda today include the Single Assurance Framework, the Risk Management Framework, Performance Management Framework, and others, and these have been key areas of focus for improvement activity. Chair, the Independent Improvement Board met on the 11th of September to consider progress and also to engage with colleague CA board members in a discussion on devolution. And a note from the Chair of the Independent Improvement Board has been circulated that sets out the observations of the Improvement Board. Chair, I'll leave it there. I'm conscious there are a number of reports on the agenda, but I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you again, Angela. I'm obviously very pleased to see this report and to see the colour of the various RAG ratings. Questions and comments from the board, perhaps? Oh, we have one. Councillor Conboy. Sarah, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It would be remiss for us not to congratulate you on the progress that is being made. It's incredibly pleasing to see how many greens and things which are moving towards green. And although I don't have any particular comments, I think it would be inappropriate for us to not comment and remark on it positively.
Thank you. I would just want to make one comment, I think, Angela, and I'll just put it on as a sort of a public record. Obviously, one of the things that the board has asked is more engagement and to make sure in sort of preparation, conversations, one-to-ones between ourselves as board members. And certainly that is something I have enjoyed and I think it's certainly a benefit. Not always possible, but I think it's something that we can always work on. But I think an important thing in speaking to several board members, they have highlighted in the specific request in terms of board development, the quite a significant amount of time that has been asked for board members to give to demonstrate and to work on that. Now, across the board, everybody is keen to engage in the process, but they were concerned at some of the proposals in terms of the hours and over that relatively short period of time. And I have to say that was literally every single board member, and I include myself. So ironically, I think there is a demonstration here of the board working quite well together, because we are coming together in terms of wanting to kind of join with the development, but we also across the board agreed that the current ask as maybe being proposed is one that we can't all agree on, but we know we can agree that we're not able to sort of commit to that level. So I would just ask maybe in conversations with board members going forward and as a representative speaking on behalf of the board, that we look at how we organise that and are respective of the lead and the commitments that all other leaders already have. In truth, it's probably a lot easier for me, but I suspect leaders with other commitments elsewhere are struggling, and we need to take that into consideration.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That is noted. It's your development programme, so it's important it works for you. We will look at that and come back to you shortly on what we can do to make sure it works for you, because that's the key and the most important element.
Thank you. No more comments. Well, we've been asked to note the report, which we have now done, and no vote is required. It means we can now move on to item 9. Now, this budget update report is from Nick Bell, our Executive Director for Resources and Performance, and he will be introducing the report. Now, how are we going to do this? Are we doing it from... Where's Nick?
Is that?
Oh, he's there. That's right. Sorry. And are all the officers going to be coming here? Yeah. For all the... Okay, fine. Nick, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The report today presents the financial position to the end of July, 4 months into the financial year. And as expected early in the financial year, the vast majority of the budgets are on track to hit their forecast outturn. However, we do report on any revenue variances in excess of 200,000 or any forecast capital variances in excess of 500,000. And the report covers 2 main revenue variances with free skills boot camps and concessionary fares, and 4 capital variances: affordable homes programme, the care homes retrofit, the housing loan for Histon Road, and Fletton Quays footbridge. And the variances are described in more detail in Appendix B to the report. The report also seeks approval for a change of the budget profile to the Market Towns programme to bring it into line with the report that was agreed at the board earlier this year. And Appendix D provides more information in relation to that particular programme and the reprofiling. And then finally, the report also identifies additional income which has arisen from our Treasury management investments, as our cash and the interest rates have both continued to be higher than we forecast when setting the medium-term financial plan. And it presents proposals for a number of investments which are one-off in value, in nature, they link to the strategic priorities of the combined authority, and they use some of that additional income. They are included in Appendix C to the report. And we're also asking the board to note that that will leave approximately £4 million of unallocated Treasury management income, and that it is suggested that further proposals are brought back to the November board around how this fund may be utilised, including any options that might help to alleviate the cost of living crisis in a targeted way. So those are the key points I just wanted to raise, Mayor, and then happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for concise delivery. Open to... Okay.
Anna, Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Nick. Just referring to page 94, which is Appendix C, there's an item on there about civil parking enforcement and the contribution from the combined authority to the districts that are wanting to take that up. It talks about contributing £150,000 per district area, which it talks about being a third of the costs. It's my understanding that that has that the implementation costs have risen very, very considerably above £450,000. So my question is, will the CPCA be increasing its contribution to be a third beyond the 150 already agreed in the business plan?
If I may comment in relation to that, my understanding on this one is that this was an agreement that was made between the County Council, the Greater Cambridge Partnership and the CPCA, subject to approval, to fund the initial implementation costs. We haven't been approached to increase that amount. As at the current date. The 150,000 is a contribution towards effectively the legal work and the initial signage. There are further budgets then that actually are capital in nature that are actually around the implementation. And it may be those budgets, I think, are going up quite significantly. They form part of the wider, in certain areas, they're met by different authorities. So Greater Cambridge Partnership meets South Cambridgeshire. We meet the Fenland costs through the Market Towns programme. And the Huntingdonshire costs are met from, I believe, another source, which I can't, unfortunately, recall today. But there are different costs that come into there.
If you want to further...
Sorry, I'm not sure that's exactly answered my question, and maybe you're not in a position to answer my question, but so it says that that the CPCA will be funding a third of the costs. I don't think £150,000 is going to represent a third of the costs. So what I'm keen to understand is whether the CPCA will be increasing its budget in this regard.
So my apologies. I believe that there were two separate budgets was the point I was trying to make. There's the initial budget, the 150, that covers the 450 in total, which is around the original legal orders. And then there's a further budget which is around implementation. I believe it's the implementation budget that may be going up beyond this stage. But I will get back to you, if I may, just to confirm that in writing after the meeting finishes. But I believe that's the situation.
Chris, Councillor Bowden.
Thank you very much indeed, Mayor. I have to concur with the comments made by Councillor Bailey that the overall costs of implementation of CPE, whether they be the legal costs or other costs, have risen very substantially indeed over the last 3 years, and things have gone remarkably slowly in terms of moving the whole process forwards. We are grateful in Fenland that it was agreed by the board that of the Market Towns money, which was made available by the Combined Authority, £100,000 per town, that is £400,000 in total, would go towards each individual, 100,000 for each individual town's costs on CPE implementation. But even with that, and even with the money which is talked about in terms of support from the CPCE in this report, we are still massively short of the figures. The last figure I heard for Fenland, and I've no idea how authoritative it is, but I fear that it will only go upwards. The last figure I heard was £900,000 for implementation in Finland. We are desperate to have CPE. We believe the sooner it comes about, the better, and we want to cooperate with that. But the financial position is such that the implementation costs alone are potentially so great that it will be scuppered if there isn't additional support. So I'd be grateful if that's taken into account in the work which you do and when you report back to us. But additionally, a request has been made, and I don't know if it's got to you yet, but a request is meant to have been made to ask for the £400,000, that is the 4 lots of £100,000 from the Market Towns Fund, for the date of spend of that to be extended to match the delays that have been on CPE, so that we can still manage to have that £400,000 available when finally we are able to get to the stage of implementing CPE. Thank you, Mayor.
Do you want to comment on any of that, Nick, please?
Just to comment that I will absolutely take all those issues on board. The message, I believe, has come through in relation to the phasing, and we'll make sure that's in place in terms of the actual phasing there. Councillor Bowden.
Sarah, Councillor Conboy.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the report. 2 points of underspend in our area, in Huntingdonshire, which I'll pick up offline with officers. But just to put on record, I'm very much hoping that the underspend in regard to cold spots, the FE cold spots, and some of the work that we were anticipating is simply a short delay. And this is Appendix A, page 7. So I'll pick that up with officers because that's obviously something we're very keen to see brought forward. And also particularly the A141 and St Ives work, that's important for us not only to unlock housing targets, but importantly for economic development. So I'll pick that up with officers offline, but that's why these financial reports are important, because then we can triangulate progress and we wouldn't want to see too many delays. I don't know if there's any further information you wish to share, but I'm happy to pick that up offline.
Thank you, Councillor Conboy. If I may pick that up offline, if that's okay, because I don't have all the detail here with me today. Thank you.
Are there any more comments? Oh, Lucy, Councillor Nessinger.
Wow, it works. Yeah, just to pick up on the cold spots issue, this came up quite significantly at the Skills Committee, and I think it has been made clear, but I have no hesitation in making clear again just how annoyed I am about the delay on that one, and I think there is absolute unanimity across the whole combined authority on just what an important project that is. I know I've had a conversation with Richard about it, and I've also mentioned it to Rob, but I didn't think there was any harm in raising that again now, just to make sure that it is that we make sure it is a short delay, because that is a project that I think is close to many of our hearts. Thank you.
Any further comments? Well, I just want to make a couple of things. Once again, Nick, thank you for a very clear, concise, clarifying where we have underspends. And particularly note the issue about public transport concessionary fares in regard to, you know, the bigger picture of how we're moving with the development of trying to improve public transport access for all. Obviously, concessionary fares are an important part of encouraging people onto the buses, and I know through the effects of COVID and maybe people slightly unwilling to move back onto that mechanism of travel. I'm very much behind what we can do to support that DFT-led publicity campaign, and I really would just make a plea to all members, board members, you know, working with your constituent authorities as we sort of move forward, engagement with the public and particularly those who use the concessionary fares, bearing in mind that the potential proposal for the off-peak only rule may well be moving in the future. There's a real potential here to kind of get an enhanced use of public transport by all across the community, and that would be in all areas, and hopefully in its way also encourage the development of our bus network reform and overview. So thank you again for highlighting that fact. Thank you for the questions. And just a final comment, I'm very grateful for, you know, obviously there's a few proposals in there which very much sit with our strategy, and there's a little bit of acknowledgement there. I'm grateful for, with particularly the health and wellbeing strategy, skills development, which sits very comfortably with the mayoral priority of looking at health inequality. And I know John from the Integrated Care Board is very keen to sort of work on that as going forward. Another hopefully good example of how we can be a bit of a trailblazer when it comes to sort of working in a devolved way. But most importantly, knowing, you know, ironically that Treasury management has meant that there's a little bit more money around, it is at the same time at the great cost to our local communities with a cost of living crisis, and the idea that our programme response fund should be very much sort of badged with a kind of addressing the cost of living crisis is something I am really wholeheartedly about. And I think if that could be a real focus of the minds of the board and any sort of proposals going forward, I really would appreciate it. So thank you for that. However, I don't think you can go away before we have to take a vote, and I'm going to move to the vote on recommendations B and C, whilst, and I know, yeah, and a recommendation A is just to note. So I need a seconder for recommendations B and C. My deputy, Councillor Smith. Those in favour? Are you voting? Oh, sorry. Okay, fine, thank you.
Okay. Those against? Abstaining. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So that's been carried by a majority. And that means we can now move on to item 10, which is a corporate strategy and medium-term financial plan refresh process. Nick, I know you've been heavily involved in this, so I'm glad that you're staying here with us as the Executive Director for Resources and Performance. And if you could now introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor. The report incorporates both the corporate plan process as well as the medium-term financial plan process, which is a key improvement that we've made this year to align better our corporate planning and budgeting process, which links to the improvement programme that Angela Probert discussed earlier. The proposal this year is that we adopt a fairly light touch refresh for the corporate plan, following some very significant changes that were made to that last year. There's an appendix to the report which covers both the proposed member engagement and officer engagement and public engagement during the course of the medium-term financial plan process and the corporate planning process. And that creates significant opportunities as well as a public engagement for engagement with our constituent councils and with our individual board members as well. So there are opportunities for the board as a whole to be briefed on the existing MTFP, which is repriced, and the emerging pressures, which happen in October. And then an opportunity for individual meetings with board members, with myself as a statutory Section 73 officer, if any board member, either individually or together, wish to develop proposals or amendments to the budget. There will also be plenty of opportunities for Constituent Council Section 151 officers and chief executives to contribute as well to the development of the corporate plan and the medium-term financial plan as well. So there are 4 key stages to this process. Stage 1 we're hopefully coming towards the end of now, because the intent is that this was very much around how we develop our plans to get the new corporate plan and the medium-term financial programme in place. And if it's approved today, this process, then we reach the end of that stage 1. Stage 1, by the way, has been through a lot of consultation with overview and scrutiny, informally with leaders, with constituent councils, Section 151s and chief executives as well. Stage 2 is then planned to run from mid-September to mid-October. This will be the refresh of the corporate plan, with being really driven by the 6-month review of the progress against the current plan. At the same time, we will reprice the existing medium-term financial plan for known inflation, known pressures and changes, and also develop any options from officers that the board may wish to consider. That will end with a board workshop in October that we will take the board through the details in relation to that repriced medium-term financial plan and the corporate strategy. Stage 3 runs from mid-October to the end of November, which enables members to develop the budget proposals and the potential changes to the corporate plan for consultation. As mentioned, I'll make myself available to all board members during that period to provide any detail or required assessment of any options they wish to provide. That ends that particular stage on the 29th of November with our November board meeting, when the draft budget for consultation is brought to the board for approval. And then it's the final stage, stage 4, runs from December to the end of January. This incorporates consultation with the public and other key stakeholders on the draft budget, as well as significant engagement again with constituent councils, an opportunity again for board members to develop any amendments to that draft budget. And once again, I'll make myself available, as I mentioned in the previous stage, to look at those amendments from a Section 73 perspective. I would request that any amendments come through by the 17th of January to enable me as a statutory Section 73 officer to take a review of those before they go to the board on the 31st of January. I'll leave the report there if I may and take any questions, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of comments. So for accuracy, this report was actually published with the lead member stated as Councillor Edna Murphy, who is now here, when this actually comes under my responsibilities. So I actually will be moving the recommendations myself from the chair, and I'll need a seconder. But keen to take some questions. And just as a final comment, this is, I think, the 3rd time as a mayor, I'll be going into this process. I very much remember the first time as very much a learning experience for myself, and unfortunately last year I wasn't really part of it due to my absence, and I'm very grateful for the work that was done in that sort of kind of different type of setting, particularly by my deputy at the time.
I can only say that my initial reading of this report, and particularly the 4 stages, feels very well and clearly documented. But I'd really be keen to hear now from the board about how they feel we should move forward, and any questions for Nick on this. Al Kiln.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment because whilst I'm new in my role as Chair of the Business Board, I have been on the Business Board for a number of years prior to that. And there's obviously, like every organisation, there's definitely been a journey in terms of both transparency and engagement on some of the process for shaping plans. I don't normally advocate too much planning and policy in balance to action, but I actually think in this case here, this is a significant shift forward in terms of process and transparency and opportunities for engagement. And I think whilst there looks like there's quite a lot of steps on this journey, I think actually with a deep dive, they're really very constructive in terms of bringing together a stronger governance and oversight of where we're planning. So I know this has been presented and shared with business board members and was seen as something that was favourable and very accessible.
Thank you for Anna. Councillor Smith.
Lower button. Got it now. Thank you. I mean, I think there's been a huge amount of work put into this to ensure that we have a process that everyone's involved in. There's good consultation, there's good discussion. And I really appreciate that everything is set out with clear timelines. I think that's incredibly helpful. You've got 2 lines, quite rightly, one for leaders, one for board. I think there are a couple of things in the leaders line that ought to be in the board line. For example, on the leaders line, you've talked about leaders submitting alternative budget proposals. I think that's actually the board that does that rather than leaders. It's just important to make sure that we've got the nomenclature absolutely right on that to ensure clarity. But I think this is incredibly helpful. Thank you for the work that's been done on this by you and your team.
Thank you, Anna. I can't see anybody else indicating a desire to speak. So as I said, I will move in the recommendations myself from the chair and looking for a seconder. I'll take that from my other deputy, Councillor Singer. But I think we've had a debate that we wanted, so I'll now move to the vote on the recommendation to approve the proposed timetable and process to refresh the corporate strategy and medium-term financial plan. Those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? Thank you. So that has passed as a majority. Right. If you bear with me in item 11, this is now really something that kind of was highlighted by Angela in terms of a process where item 11 is the draft single assurance framework. Now, this is to be introduced by Jodie, who, and I have had the benefit of a lot of support by private briefings to understand quite the direction of travel, and I thought it was very important that I give a little more brief before Jodie comes to this. Basically, it's for approval for a submission to government, showing central government what we're all about, and it follows a significant amount of work by officers working with partners to develop processes intended to support the delivery of our strategic objectives, drive improvements in business case development and consideration, and subsequently improve the likelihood of benefits being realised for all. Now, we've all been briefed, engaged and provided steer on the development of this framework as a collective board. We've done this through setting out the design principles for the development of the framework and setting out specific rules it must adhere to, such as the principle of approval and providing direction when required on key elements, such as approval thresholds and an investment committee role. The work that has gone into developing this framework, I believe, is a positive example of the combined authority and its constituent councils now working in a closer partnership with each other. The framework seeks to provide a consistent approach to the development of ideas, a proportionate approach to the development of business cases against government and regional standards, and a proportionate and supportive approach to business case consideration and approvals, delivering the technical assurance, considerations and advice to us, the decision makers.
In July 2022, when the board endorsed in full the independent review of governance, we recognised that the combined authority lacked a number of governance foundations and fundamentals, some of which dated back to the setting up of this combined authority. Since then, the improvement plan, which we've heard about earlier, has followed that review, has built foundations through a new governance framework with clearer roles and responsibilities, a new approach to delivering the scrutiny function which continues to develop, and new ways of working between the combined authority, its constituent councils, and its partner at both a member and officer level. Improvements in ways of working have been so significant that the Independent Improvement Board has received feedback from the constituent councils that has suggested that the original approach to the work stream on partnership improvement is no longer required. For me, this is testament to the relationships that the Chief Executive, the corporate management team and the wider officer corps have been building with their counterparts in all the constituent councils. Let's not kid ourselves, there are still building blocks that need to be put in place. This framework is one of them, alongside the performance management framework and the risk management framework that we will also be considering today. Don't worry, I won't be saying exactly the same thing for those two things. But now I would like to invite Jodie Townsend to present the framework to the committee and provide clarity on the ask of board today, before moving to Councillor Murphy, should you choose, as the lead member for governance, to provide comment, because I know you have been integral to helping with this process. Thank you. Jodie.
Thank you, Mayor. So I present to board the Single Assurance Framework for approval. For clarity, the ask today is that you approve the framework as the Combined Authorities Framework for consideration by government. If approved, the framework will undergo assessment against the requirements of the English Devolution Accountability Framework by the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, with Department for Transport and Department for Education assessment of transport and education skills specifics. The intention would be then to bring a further report to board on the 29th of November, confirming the outcome of the clearance process with government and detailing any amendments requested for your consideration. This would be presented alongside an implementation plan for the framework, which would include a proposed implementation date for the framework to become operational. The report also provides board with an opportunity to provide comment on the developing terms of reference for the proposed investment committee, which would be an extension of the existing shareholder board, as well as the opportunity to comment on the developing terms of reference for the technical officer investment panel that would provide key support to the application of the framework. These have been included to provide further context to the proposed single assurance framework. I have previously spoken to board about the content of the framework and the 3 key phases set out within it. This information is detailed in the report before you and the framework at Appendix A. It is also further detailed in the report considered by the Audit and Governance Committee on the 8th of September, where the Audit and Governance Committee were asked to support the framework after providing test and challenge to its content, specifically in relation to assurance and value for money considerations that the framework seeks to provide. The Audit and Governance Committee unanimously supported the framework and also the developing terms of reference for both the Investment Committee and the Investment Panel. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee also undertook a deep dive into the improvement workstream responsible for the development of this framework at its meeting on Monday. They provided no further comment to the board paper or the framework. Before presenting the framework to board for consideration and to answer any questions, I would like to highlight the development approach taken to this piece of work, and also the performance management framework and risk management framework, which we also consider today. There has been significant close engagement with constituent authority officers for a partner working group in undertaking the development of this framework. Some elements of the framework and the supporting guidance and templates that will accompany the framework have been co-produced with constituent authority officers. The entire framework has been shared with the partner working group for comment and consideration within your own councils, and the ways of working between the framework project group within the CA and council officers on the working group has been extremely beneficial to us. I would ask that you take back our gratitude to your officers' input into this framework. I would also like to thank both Councillor Murphy as the governance lead member and the regional chief executives who have provided steer and challenge throughout the development process. In particular, I would like to thank the Chief Executive of Fenland Council, who has provided significant guidance on STEER through the development of this framework and the other two frameworks that you have before you today. Finally, in reference to the framework itself, the benefits it can provide are set out in the report. The framework places the golden thread of your strategic objectives at its core, alongside national and regional standards of development, and sets out simple to follow check and challenge processes to deliver proportionate assurance. In simplest terms, the Single Assurance Framework seeks to provide appropriate and consistent consideration of new concepts to drive your strategic objectives, improve standards of project development and appraisal with clear roles and responsibilities, provide clear lines of accountability, and seek to better inform decision makers from a technical assurance perspective. I present the framework to board and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jodie. Edna, Councillor Murphy, as the lead member for governance, are you happy to propose the recommendations in this report, and are you wanting to speak?
I'm very happy to recommend these proposals, and may I add just a few comments to what Jodie has said. Thank you. Yes, colleagues, I very much recommend this report. It has been a long time in evolution, and it's been very intensely worked on, and most importantly, worked on in a collegiate and inclusive manner, very much with engagement and new ways of working to the fore. It has, from my perspective, it has really benefited from the learning and good practice that exists elsewhere, and that is very valuable in this kind of new development. And of course, what this is really about is it's the guts of the combined authorities' capability for delivery. So it is fundamental. It is fundamental in terms of it's got to deliver to residents, and it's got to be connected, as Jodie says, to the strategic objectives. The challenge that the Audit and Governance Committee felt was, to make this real. And to make this real, it has to live and breathe in the minds of the officers who have the responsibility to deliver their bit of whatever the process is that is being defined. And I am confident that underpinning with roles and responsibilities has happened in the development of new roles and so on, bringing new people on board, and in training and discussion. So although it's a huge amount and it's been done very quickly, it has been really deep and thorough. So I fully recommend it, and I applaud the officers for the work on this.
I would echo those comments to the point that I will put myself forward as the seconder for this report. Opening up the report for debate by the whole of the board. Anna, Councillor Bailey.
Just a couple of questions, but I just want to say thank you, because I think it's a very careful and competent piece of work. It's an enormous piece of work, and thank you for the way it's been carried out. Jodie and I have had email conversations on a couple of matters, and I must confess to not having read every word of the current draft. I just wanted to check where we were with the issue about business cases being signed off under delegated powers and consultation with with local authorities if they are geographically specific. And just to make sure that is reflected, because I couldn't just spot it in the document. And also, if you could just say something about where we are with what happens if a business case has varied by the time it comes back for sign-off, and how we judge whether it's varied enough to go back to the board. I know that's something you've been considering, and if you could just comment on that, that would be great. But thank you for a great piece of work, Jodie.
Two questions for you there, Jodie. Can you get the answers today, or?
So on the first point, and I'd like to thank Councillor Bailey for the formal words proposed to pick up her first point, where a concept is proposed or a business case where if it's specific to a single constituent council area. This is in the assurance framework at 4.6.5. So where a concept is proposed is specific to a single constituent council area, that constituent council is formally consulted with their view being provided to the board when considering that concept. We've also picked that up much further in more detail in the guidance that's in development, and we will of course be sharing that with your officers and yourselves as that process continues. In regard to the where business cases variances, of course we have the tolerances detail within the assurance framework itself, but there will be a amended and changed change management process that will support this, and that will of course be coming to board hopefully on the 29th of November alongside that implementation plan, and so you will get the say on whether those tolerances and changes are specific enough for your request.
Thank you, Jodie. Very clear. Al from the Business Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted just to share a reflection on one section because I think, as you all know, there's been significant change in the structures and that oversight from a Business Board perspective since March 2023 and that LEP position. And there's been and have been a number of discussions to make sure that we look at that restructure and how that can have maximum impact, both for benefiting economic growth, but also underpinning some of the activities we do linked to government expectation of business voice. And I wanted just to comment that there's been a number of meetings I've had with Jodie that I felt have been extremely constructive in terms of the process. Comments from workshops have been fed back in, have been reflected within that. And I think actually the revised structure provides much more clarity on and evidence of embedding business voice across all of the constituent groups. So I wanted to just reflect the fact that I think from a Business Board perspective, there's been a lot of discussion and consultation, and that's been genuinely appreciated.
Thank you, Al, for that feedback. Are there any more comments? If not, as I say, we have a proposer and a seconder. So in regards to item 11, we'll move to the vote on recommendation A. And just to note that recommendation B is for noting. Those in favour of recommendation A? Those against? Those abstaining? So again, we pass that with a majority. Thank you, Jodie, again. Item 12, kind of in the same ballpark, but this is where we're going to be inviting Chris Bolton, Head of Programme Management Office, to introduce the report on the Risk Management Framework. I'm also told that Adam Licorice from RSM will be joining us online if questions specific are required of him. Chris, are you ready to go?
I am ready to go, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all well. We've been working very hard. We just talked to Jodie about the SAF, and the risk management framework is part of the SAF. So it's part of the sort of guidelines that we want to make sure that we're meeting. In particular, what we're trying to do with this framework is, one, bring it up to date. It's not been looked at for about 3 years. We've added some parts to it as well, things like a risk appetite statement. We didn't have one of those previously. And we want to be much clearer on sort of roles and responsibilities, and equally, how the framework should be used. So for programme and project officers, they understand how to use the framework, equally how they need to escalate any risks from a project level up to a programme and so on. I suppose where we're trying to get to, and this, you recognise this early days with the framework, is that we want to make sure the governance is correct. Equally, we want to make sure that there's a risk culture. Now, at the moment, we have the frameworks here in front of you to hopefully approve today. But that's just the first part of it. We really need to sort of back up the work that we're doing right across the board and support our officers so that they have a really good understanding. The important thing there here, I think, is that it should be a no-blame culture. So people should be encouraged to raise any issues or any risks associated with any of their work. and they feel comfortable in the structures of where they can do that, and that they'll be supported. The framework itself, as I briefly mentioned earlier, we've looked at the roles and responsibilities, and it makes it a little bit easier for people to understand their role in managing risks. We had the corporate risk appetite session back in April, so that was with the corporate management team. As I mentioned previously, we didn't have a risk appetite previously. So to give a good example there, the risk appetite for finance, for example, is quite cautious, which is exactly what you'd expect, and so on. And we've gone through all the services looking at those risk appetites. Now, what we've also done is associate maximum scores, or associated maximum scores, with said risk appetites. So therefore, if you're a programmer or a project manager, or equally a director, if you're looking at your score in your risk and it's above that risk appetite maximum, that's a signal for you that you need escalation. So the escalation would be from project level up to program, or sort of directorate service level, right up to the corporate level and the corporate management team as well. Other areas that we've been really looking at as well is enhancing the reporting of risk. Now, we know that obviously the framework and procedure is in front of you today. We go to A&G every 2 months. We've been asked to go back every 2 months with our risk register, where we look at the corporate risks in particular, the direction of travel, so the trends. And equally, we want to make sure that there's a mechanism there if there's a risk from left field, for example. Now, I'm thinking of listening to the radio this morning and some potential change on net zero. We have a risk on a corporate management register. You would probably say, well, that needs revisiting. So we don't wait for the next meeting. We usually meet monthly with performance and resources. Equally, risks are looked at monthly with the corporate management team. So we try to make sure that we capture any of the changes, and the reporting is relatively easy to do. In addition to the framework from 3 years ago as well, is now that we have a lessons learned log. Previously we didn't really have that, wasn't used. Now we have a bit of software. When any of the particular projects are closed, we will pick up, we sit down, we have a closure meeting, we pick up those lessons learned. And that's available for all the rest, going back to the Sept and bringing forward new business cases and new projects. When we're kicking those off, we look at those lessons learned log so we can think, okay, what's going to work? What do we need to look out for? But just to add around supporting the programme and project managers, you'll see in the paper we've done lots of training with members from the Audit and Governance Committee, a couple of sessions there. We've done risk training for all the programme and project managers within the combined authority, including the subsidiary companies. We're rolling that out to provide training for the nominated officers from your organisations that have been helping us with the work, the external working group we were calling them. So we've got support in place to make sure that we really embed that risk. Now, the last thing I'd like to cover, if it's okay, is around the sort of technology that we use. Now, at the moment, it's quite old-fashioned. It's a spreadsheet. There's multiple spreadsheets. You know how many sort of programs and projects there are. You know, many, 44 on a single register and above that overall. That could be quite labour-intensive. It's trying to get a view, getting visibility across risk in all the programs and projects. Now, we've purchased or procured a 4-risk piece of software from RSM, which will centralise the recording of all the risks. Now, we're kicking off that project at the moment. It should last a couple of months, the implementation. We're gathering the data for that now at service level risk. Again, I mean, equally, going back to the lessons learned and working with our external partners. We were talking to Cambridge City and South Cambs only yesterday about 4Risk. That's the tool that they use as well. So what we really want to do with the framework and also the procedure is give all our project and programme managers the tools that they need to be able to handle risk, competently. And equally, from a CMT, from a board level, you get the information that you need. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chris. Once again, Councillor Murphy, as the lead member for governance, are you happy to propose the recommendation in this report and possibly speak to it?
Yes, indeed, I'm very happy to propose this, as I was the other report with my name on it. The risk management can be, I think, the challenge and it's a challenge for all of us. It's not just for officers, it's for all of us, is to really make sure that our risk management is something that is very much to the forefront of all of our minds and all of the managers and project managers, and isn't a siloed activity that is conducted in isolation of the challenges of normal day-to-day business. So I think that the Audit and Governance Committee is very much alive to investigating and challenging, doing constructive challenge on the risk management framework. And I observed a very good discussion about this the other week, and I do think that we're in a very good position. So I think it's a really excellent piece of work, and I thoroughly recommend it to members.
Thank you, Edna. Risk, a four-letter word, but with so much influence over what we do and the decisions we make in life. I'm happy to be the seconder for this recommendation, but it's open to you now, the board. Again, first up.
Thank you. I think it's a really strong piece of work. There's some really clear visibility, particularly in terms of risk appetite and process and flow, which always gets a tick in the box for me. But I'm also conscious from a business perspective that it's ultimately risk appetite is only effective if you have the right feed-in of evidence and information to generate that genuine assessment of risk. And so my question is, whilst I think the framework is a really good, strong point forward, how does that fit into evolving and being more effective in our actual measuring of risk up front with the data sets we might be using?
Thank you for the question. I think it goes back to the embedding point. We need to make sure that everyone, each area, each level, the people are comfortable with risk, and equally they feel that they're, just as we've pulled together the framework, that they're fully involved in sort of co-producing, co-designing. So I think we need to do the same thing with the embedding work as well. So I'm more than happy to come to the business board and talk to them about some of the work that we're doing with risk, and equally get their feedback so that we can work out how that can be embedded more in greater detail.
Chair, if I may respond.
Yeah, no, come back, please.
Apologies, Councillor Comby. I think there's definitely an opportunity there. Most of the members from the business board will be looking at opportunities within their own businesses as well as central investment, where risk is absolutely a core strategy. So it would be an opportunity perhaps to compare and contrast and hopefully align. And I think that would be a really constructive process at the appropriate time.
I think, I suppose one thing to add, with the risk software, we'll be capturing more information, better information. So I think that will obviously help as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Comboy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report, and thank you for the considerable amount of work that's gone into it. You said some really important things that I can't let go. You said about the no-blame culture. I think that's absolutely essential that that's embedded. It's really welcome to hear that being said. That corporate risk appetite is really important, and one of the things I'd reflect is also, from time to time, we need to understand the risk we take as a board if we are to approve something, or equally defer it or refuse it, because that's a real challenge for us, because sometimes we don't always necessarily appreciate all of the operational risk or possibly the financial strategic risk. So I think embedding that in our thinking is really helpful too. And I think also those lessons learned are really important, and I would welcome those feeding back to us at board level on a fairly regular basis so that we also understand what we're learning together as we move forward. So thank you very much.
There are no further indications of a desire to speak, so we've obviously noted the report, but we do need to take a vote on the recommendation. It's been proposed, it's been seconded, so now we need to know who's in favour. Those in favour? Those against? And those abstaining? Thank you, noted. We will be passing this by a majority. Thank you again, Chris, for coming to the table. And finally, item 13, not necessarily unlucky for anybody, but it is the Performance Management Framework and Corporate Performance Report, Quarter 1, 2023 to 24. Well trailed, but Jules Lent, as the Interim Policy Manager, your opportunity to introduce the report. Thank you, Jules.
Thank you, Chair. As Jodie mentioned earlier, this report represents the culmination of a collaborative piece of work for which I would like to thank members, constituent authority officers and officers from across the combined authority for their contributions. The new performance management framework presented here would ensure that we have a consistent, streamlined and joined-up approach to performance management in line with the expectations of the English Devolution Accountability Framework. We hope that it helps you have insight into the achievement of our goals and our impact on wider society. This report follows on from the Interim Performance Management Report presented to this committee in July. It is the beginning of a quarterly cycle, with further performance reports due in November and January. The report has a number of parts. Members are asked to approve the Performance Management Framework in Appendix A. As we are short of time, I won't go into detail about the framework, but essentially this sets out how we will do performance management and how our culture will support effective performance management. Members are also asked to scrutinise 3 sets of performance information. A new set of corporate key performance indicators, or KPIs, presented in a balanced scorecard and dashboard in Appendix B. A dashboard of the most complex programmes and projects, presented in Appendix C. And a narrative report on headline priority activities. We have characterised KPIs as owned by the CPCA when the ability to change the indicator lies wholly or mainly with a combined authority. An example is metric 25, which is gigabit broadband availability. I need to bring to members' attention that there is a late amendment to these indicators which has not pulled full through to the final report, and please accept my sincere apologies for this. The current period and previous period position for metric 16, which is number of contract waivers submitted, should be 2, not 1, and this should give an amber RAG rating, not green. Therefore, with this amendment, of 12 metrics owned by the CPCA, 1 is going in the wrong direction, so is RAG rated as red. 2 are unchanged, so are RAG rated as amber. And 9 are going in the right direction, so are RAG rated as green. 15 of the KPIs cover the position of the wider Cambridge and Peterborough region, where the outcome and the ability to change the indicator does not lie wholly or mainly with the combined authority. An example is metric 5, number of business startups. We have categorised these as state of the region KPIs. 9 of these indicators are red, and the remaining 6 are green. The most complex programmes and projects are those that are considered most significant in terms of value, strategic fit, and where there would be some significant impact if we were to fail to deliver. For example, Peterborough Station Quarter. These are RAG rated on the basis of level of confidence in successful delivery. Of 7 programmes and projects, 4 are rated amber and the remaining 3 are green. We recognise that it can take 2 to 3 years to develop and embed a new performance management system. So further work is planned to refine how we measure and manage performance, and we will rely on your feedback to guide this work. Therefore, members are also asked to comment on how we could improve our performance information, how our performance information is measured and presented. For example, you will notice that Appendix A presents summary information for all the KPIs on one page in a balanced scorecard, in addition to a dashboard for each KPI that goes into greater detail. We need your feedback on this balanced scorecard, whether there is anything missing or surprising in the flow through from strategic objectives to indicators and metrics. Also, you may find it counterintuitive that the current period can be up to 4 years ago. This is because current period refers to the most recently available data and is determined by how frequently the data is refreshed. We have sought to provide a useful comparator for each KPI, often a national average, and we are interested to know whether you find this helpful. For example, metric 6 is new housing completions per 1,000 of the population. This metric is RAG rated red because performance has gone down when the desired improvement is up. However, despite this dip, the comparator shows that performance has been consistently higher than the East region and national averages. We would also welcome your feedback on whether it would be useful to have more performance reporting against targets. We are working on setting and agreeing more targets relating to the corporate KPIs where appropriate. And once these are in place, we will be able to RAG rate performance against target in addition to RAG rating against direction for improvement. I'm happy to take questions.
Well, I will be moving the recommendation from the chair. I will need a seconder. Okay, I'll take that from Councillor Nasinger. But now's the time to debate the report. Open to the board. Chris, Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, may I express my gratitude that the challenge I made at the Leader Strategy meeting concerning the seventh metric that we've got has been comprehensively addressed by officers. We now have a measure which, although rather inadequate in one respect, which I'll come to in a second, is actually a measure of what it's meant to be, and it's the best that we've got available. And my reservation is, and it's already been mentioned, that the data that we have for this is such that we are talking about being up to 4 years behind in getting data actually produced. And that is not our fault, it is merely a reflection of the data which is made available to us. And it's in respect of that I would just ask for one further refinement at some stage or other, and that is that it's made quite clear in each metric which is the current, what period does the current period reflect, and what period does the previous period reflect. And it just would be so much easier in using these metrics to be able to see that clearly on the face of the document rather than necessarily having to try and work it out otherwise. But apart from that, I must say I'm really pleased that metric 7 has been changed, and previously it really wasn't a satisfactory metric, and now it is much more available for our use to the extent that it can be given the limitations we've got on information. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to come in with this incredibly statistic-heavy piece of work? Anna, do you want to?
I just want to thank you for the work that's been done here. I think it's really impressive. I'm particularly impressed as well by the strong efforts that are being made to work out the things we really need to assess and then work out ways of measuring them, rather than find the things that are really easy to measure and then make those the KPIs. And I'm very pleased to see that happening. Long may that continue.
Edna, did you want to? No? Yes, Edna. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Again, a really excellent piece of work, and this is a really important component of our information to the board, and a sort of gives us at a glance a view of a whole range of really critical issues. It's a lot of work to put together, so I really pay tribute to the work that's been done. It's a good year's work, isn't it? And it's really effective, and it can grow and develop further. So thank you very much.
There's a good feeling that all this hard work's been worthwhile here, Jules. Any other further comments? Okay. Well, as I say, I've had I'm recommending, I've got my seconder. The board has had the opportunity to debate. Just for clarity, recommendations B to F have asked us to scrutinise the information we have been given, note progress and comment on its relevance and accessibility. Are we all happy to agree we've done those things? Sorry, that's just a noting thing, is it? But we can now move to the vote on the recommendation within this, which is to actually approve the performance management framework. And those in favour? Those against? And those abstaining? Thank you. Jules, I know it was a lot of work. Thank you very much. Delighted to see some of these KPIs. Thank you. So, item 13 wasn't unlucky. So, item 14, the review of the Constitution. There's a barnstorming 4 reports within this section of the agenda. Moving forward, I'm pleased with our progress. Item 4A is the procurement update. Nick Bell is here as the Executive Director for Resources and Performance and will be introducing this report. Nick.
Thank you, Matt. I'll be relatively brief on this one. It's at the board meeting in July, the board requested that we bring back the procurement guidelines for the board to have a look at those before they finalise the approval which was given in July for the contract procedure rules, procurement policy and the procurement strategy. So the guidelines are attached to this document today. They are for internal use. They're an integral part of the way we will take procurement and contract management forward within the organisation. The guidelines in terms of drafting have been supported by TLT, a national law firm, to ensure they reflect the current legal position in respect to every single part of the procurement that we undertake. And the board is asked to note the guidelines today that will then enable us to get that full approval as was given at July for the procurement policy strategy and the contract procedure rules, subject to seeing the guidelines today. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Open to debate. I think the specific was Chris. You asked for this to come back. Do you want to comment on?
Once again, I can say I'm very pleased that officers have been responsive to the challenge which was made and have come back exactly with what was requested.
Happy Councillor Bowden. Thank you, Chris. Any more comments on this? Okay. If not, I will just note the report, which we have done. No vote is required. And move on to 14B. Thank you, Nick. Which is about members' access to information. Edwina Adafahinti, the Interim Chief Officer, Legal and Governance and Monitoring Officer, will now present this report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Board. So the report before you has 2 recommendations in it. The first one, A, is to endorse the Access to Information Protocol, and the B is to approve and adopt the protocol and to delegate to the monitoring officer to circulate to all members of the combined authority. So that would include the combined authority board members, or members of thematic committees, members of the business board, members of overview and scrutiny, and members of the audit and governance committee. If I can give the context of the access to protocol that has been drafted, it was apparent a few months back, whilst having conversations with members of overview and scrutiny, that members felt that there needed to be a protocol which sort of gave guidance on how information can be accessed. So that's information within the possession of officers and the Combined Authority Board. When that was mentioned, it was then decided that this protocol should be drafted and presented to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. That was done 2 days ago, and I was asked to amend some of the wording, which I have done. So I have to apologize that the new wording hasn't found its way into the report before the board. However, I can read the wording for the minutes, really, and so that it's also made clear to the board. So this is to do with paragraph 2 of the draft protocol that's attached to the report itself. And the wording that has been approved by the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny is this: the CPCA will adopt a default position of sharing information held on request with Overview and Scrutiny Committee members. However, there may exceptionally be instances where confidential and exempt documents cannot be provided to members, for example, because this may result in legal proceedings against the CPCA. If confidentiality is breached, in those instances where it is determined that a copy of a document or part of any such document cannot be shared with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee members, officers should provide the Overview and Scrutiny Committee with a written statement setting out its reason for that decision. Finally, just to say that the protocol is very similar to what's contained in the Constitution. It's very similar to what's contained in legislation with regards to the rights of members to access information. Unless there are any questions, I will leave it with that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Edwina. Again, Edwina, you've been busy, but as the lead member for governance, are you happy to propose the recommendations in this report and possibly want to speak?
Thank you. I'm very happy to propose these recommendations, and I have nothing to add to the our estimable legal officer who's outlined it very well indeed.
I'm very keen to be the seconder here. I feel this is everything that we should be doing in terms of transparency, good governance, and I really would be quite keen to have my name to it. So I'm opening the report to debate by the board. Councillor Bailey.
I'd just like to make a comment on 14B. Is that appropriate now? Yeah.
I'm happy.
We're dealing with them both together.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to say, so page 346, which is Appendix A, this is the protocol for member access to information. And there's a new paragraph in there, and I am very uncomfortable about the ending of that paragraph. It says, however, there will be instances where confidential and exempt documents cannot be provided to members, as this may result in legal proceedings against the CPCA if confidentiality is breached. I'm afraid I think that's wholly wrong. We can't go into decisions worrying about being legally challenged because confidentiality might be breached. You know, all members of the authority who run the authority and make the decisions are held by the Code of Conduct. Everybody understands we are not to breach confidentiality. And I think I'm very concerned about which officer might be making the decision that we are not entitled to see information. And I'm afraid I can't support it with that statement in there. I'm very uncomfortable about it.
This is where I think I need a monitoring officer. I don't know if, do you want to come back, Edwina? And then I'll come back to you after Edwina. Yeah, can we deal with this first, please?
Thank you, Mayor. The legislation which I have cited in the report itself sets out the rights of members to information. The legislation itself recognizes that there will be instances where confidential information or exempt information cannot be shared with members. And this is why Overview and Scrutiny Committee have requested that I add the words to the effect that if information cannot be shared, then reasons should be given for why that information should not be shared. That is reflective of exactly the wording in the legislation itself. It's the Overview and Scrutiny Committee's Access to Information and Audit Committee's Order 2017. So there is, in accordance with the legislation and with our Constitution, instances where information cannot be shared with members. But as I stated in the amendments that I read out, that will be in exceptional circumstances. The default position is to be transparent with members and provide information to members. Thank you, Mayor.
Chris, Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the same concern that Councillor Bailey had, particularly with regard, I have to say, to the board itself. I'm not now talking about overview and scrutiny or any of the other committees or subcommittees mentioned here, but to the board itself. However, I have to admit that I could myself think of at least one case currently where it isn't appropriate for information to be given to members of the board, and no doubt there are others as well. So I can see that there can be exceptional cases where this applies. However, it seems to me that it's open to a great deal of both interpretation and potentially abuse. So what I would request is if the monitoring officer could give a guarantee that a register be established, which is available to us so we can see it, of those documents which are not being made available to the board. And that information which is not being made available to the board. I fully accept it's going to be exceptional. It shouldn't be a long document. It shouldn't happen very often. But if we at least know what we're not being told, then it allows at a later stage for us, when it is possible for us to look at that documentation, assuming it is, to assure ourselves that the process is being undertaken properly. So I wonder if that undertaking could be given, Mayor.
It seems a fair challenge from both of you. However, there's a reason we have a monitoring officer to advise us on these facts. So over to you, Edwina.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Bowden. That's a really useful suggestion. And yes, I will take it on board. And in fairness, as said in the protocol, if there is ever a refusal to give documents requested, there will be a written reason as to why that's done. And that will be obviously presented to maybe Overview and Scrutiny Committee. But I do know that I do take your suggestion, and I'll make sure that that's also incorporated in the protocol. Thank you.
Lucy, Councillor Essinger.
Thank you. I'm interested in the idea of a risk register. I would be interested to know of a register of all of these occasions. I can also see occasions when that might in itself be open to abuse. And I would be very interested to know whether that is something that routinely happens in other combined authorities or in other councils, because obviously the pattern of what's available to members is not something which is exclusive to this combined authority or indeed to these members. So I think I'm very happy to pass this document in its current form, but if further requirements or changes are needed, I wonder if we could ask for those to come back to a future meeting with an analysis about whether that happens anywhere else, because I wouldn't want us to be doing things or undertaking new burdens which were kind of disproportionate to what happens in other authorities. Thank you.
Edwina.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Netzinger. I've been in local government now for about 15 years and I haven't seen it anywhere else. However, it was a suggestion that I was willing to consider. Obviously, I am subject to the decision of the board. It's for the board to make that decision. If the board decides that the register is not necessary, then I'll defer to the board. Thank you, Mayor.
I'm just going to ask a little question myself, because obviously within that wording, however, there will be instances where confidential and exempt documents cannot be provided to members, as this may result in legal proceedings against the CPCA. Is there also a possibility that where requests could be made where there would be legal proceedings against constituent members of the combined authority? And would that be another reason where maybe we were unable to provide the information? Because obviously, increasingly as a combined authority, we are what we are. We are combined. We're working together. So I'm just trying to be clear how far this could stretch. And then the very point you're making is that you could then suddenly have a sort of a use of a list to kind of question why are you not providing the information?
Yes, I was just thinking top of my head whether those circumstances could occur. An example that I can give is, for example, if we have a contract and we then ask one of our constituent authorities to deliver that contract. And the contractors passed on confidential and commercial information to the constituent authority, which has passed it on to us, and then we disclose that information. Yes, that could lead to litigation against the constituent authority who's passed on the information that they weren't supposed to pass on to a third party. So that's an example I could think of top of my head, but it is possible that that could happen, that both the CPC and the constituent authority could be litigated against.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come to Edna in a moment. But at the moment, the proposal is to actually pass this report as it stands, taking into context some of the reservations that have already been highlighted, which could be explored even if we pass it in its current form. But this is where I am grateful, not for only for your advice, but also for a lead member for governance. So, Edna, do you want to give some oversight as a lead member on this issue?
Yes, I think there's been a proposal to have a register, and I think before we agree to that or consider that as a board, I think we do have to have it explored properly. It's not a usual thing for local government, and it's easy to see, you know, in dealings with freedom of information and so on. It's easy to see situations where the register itself, the fact of a document existing, is in a way identifying. I mean, the Combined Authority is actually a small organisation, and so I think it would be difficult in practice. But what is needed, I think, if we are going to consider this, is not to decide today on the basis of it sounds like a positive idea, but to actually properly go and explore the idea and come back with a proposal of how it could work and how to deal with the potential hazards that might arise. So I would be proposing to support the report as it is. Yes, of course, taking into consideration concerns and triggering a bit of work on the pros and cons, risks and liabilities, potential liabilities of having such a register.
Well, I'm happy certainly to proceed on that as a proposal, as a seconder, but I appreciate that there may be some disagreement. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Mayor. I have not proposed changing the document we have in front of us. I was quite happy to accept it on the undertaking which the monitoring officer had, I thought, given me, that it would be possible to produce a register so that we could keep track of what has not been disclosed to us, and we'd be able to have transparency as far as that's concerned. And I'm quite confident that in creating such a register, any individual item can be worded in such a way, even if it has to be extremely vague, to ensure that the item has been registered and at a later point the failure to disclose can, if necessary, be looked at. So I wasn't suggesting a change to the document we have in front of us, and if the monitoring officer is still happy to do what she said she would do in response to my previous question, then I'll be happy to support this.
But correct me if I'm wrong here, you would have to take that instruction from the board, so it would be a case of, although we could take it as it is at the moment and taking into account the comments that you made, to actually formally draw up a list, you would have to be instructed by the board. Is that correctly at another meeting in the future?
Thank you. No, I had assumed that what Councillor Bowden was requesting was that the changes be incorporated into the protocol, and that's what I'd said at the end. But if, from my understanding, what you're asking is a separate register not to be incorporated into the protocol is approved as is. That's my understanding. So you're separating the protocol from the register. You're not asking for me to incorporate into the protocol a requirement for a register to be kept. Have I understood that?
Thank you. What I had requested was that the monitoring officer give consideration to producing such a register so that we can keep track of this. Whether it's within or without this particular protocol isn't really relevant to me. It would be for the monitoring officer to work out how she was able to do that, and I thought she'd given an undertaking so to do. If it is the case that it has to be agreed by this board, then in the current form, without such an undertaking, I wouldn't be able to support this.
Okay. I'm coming back to Councillor Singer. Lucy.
Thank you. I think I've made it clear that I would rather the document, and I think that Chris is also in agreement that we can pass the document as it is without changes. I think on the question of keeping a register, I would like to see some more information about that before we make a decision on it. I think probably Chris would be happy with some more information on it as well. So if we can agree that that members of the board will receive a briefing note on how a risk register might be taken forward or not, and then either we can bring it back to the board or not, depending on the content of that briefing note. I would be happy with that, and I hope Chris might be as well.
It was for the monitoring officer to consider. Yes?
Yes.
We are actually being asked to agree the paper as is.
Which we
now,
will do.
I'd been perfectly happy to accept the monitoring officer's word about what she was going to do. That seems now to be less certain than was the case before. And I think it's a really important constraint which exists, that we do have some visibility of what has been done so that we can ensure that we are being given all the information that we both need and can be given when we are making our decisions. I think it's a really fundamental point as far as the board is concerned. I'm not talking about the committees and subcommittees at this point. I'm talking about the board. So I'm really reluctant, if the monitoring officer doesn't feel able to give that commitment, I really feel reluctant to support the proposal we've got in the form it is at the moment. And I just wonder, because I don't see this as being a vitally urgent item which has to come into force immediately, I just wonder if this could be worked out between now and the next Combined Authority Board meeting, so that we can then agree unanimously about how we move forwards.
Just going to take a few more comments. Anna, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I mean, I think the really core thing here is that our lead member for governance has raised the concern that we should have a little more information, a bit more due diligence before we make a decision on a register. I think that's very important for us to take into account. Sorry, I'm just waiting for there to be quiet because I can't quite concentrate when people are talking. I think that's very important to be taken into account. I can certainly think of instances where, for example, if there might be a confidential HR issue, if that was in scope, whether we'd be asking the transport team to write down every single time they were told about a bus route by bus operators and we were constrained by that window where we're not allowed to tell anyone for a certain amount of time. I can imagine all sorts of situations where this could be problematic or bureaucratic. So I'm not opposed to the idea at all. I just think we need the due diligence of further information coming back as advised by our lead member for governance. I would personally be very happy to vote on the measures as is, with an assurance that we'll have some more information on this particular new suggestion in due course.
Okay, Chair's privilege. I'm going to go to the vote on this one, but I'm just going to leave the monitoring officer to make a final comment about where they sees her role.
Thank you, Mayor. So the assurances that I'd given to Councillor Bowden was on the basis that I thought that you wanted that incorporated in the protocol, and that's how I ended my initial statement. I do take all the comments that have been made. If this is approved as is today, the assurances I can make is then I will go have a proper look at EDAF and the rules on transparency, send a briefing note to all members setting out how the register will operate. Those are the assurances I can give today. Thank you.
That's your role, so thank you. Councillor Murphy, you proposed. I seconded. We've had a debate. I'm now moving to the vote on the recommendations, which are to endorse the Access to Information Protocol, and B, approve and adopt the protocol and delegate to the monitoring officer to circulate the protocol to all members and substitutes of the Combined Authority Board, Business Board and committees as a reference point for members. Can I ask for the vote? Those in favour? Those against? And those abstaining? On this, we had a majority, so it has passed, and I would appreciate, obviously, Edwina, your urgent attention to the additional matters we discussed in the course of that discussion. 14C is co-option of independent members. And this is where, Edwina, you come in again as Legal and Governance Monitoring Officer to present the report.
Thank you, Mayor. So this report is requesting that the board review the suggested update to the Constitution and adopt the proposed changes to the Constitution to enable a co-opted independent member and their substitute from constituent authorities to be appointed. Recommendation B is seeking delegation to the Chair of Audit and Governance in consultation with the Monitoring Officer to recruit, select and appoint the independent co-opted members of the Audit and Governance Committee. And recommendation C is seeking an agreement that the role of the independent co-opted member from constituent authority is not remunerated, but to note that they will receive expenses in line with the CPCA's current policy. At the AGM of the board recommended that A&G and Overview and Scrutiny Committee consider the co-option of an independent member. That went to A&G and that was approved. An independent member was agreed by A&G. However, this report is seeking additional changes to the Constitution so that that independent member can be recruited and selected in accordance with the recommendation of this board and the agreement of audit and governance. Paragraph 2.2 sets out the additional wording that is to be included in the Constitution. The first one basically gives the Audit and Governance Committee the ability to appoint a member every year. And it sets out very clearly that the independent member does not represent a political party or their constituent authorities for the purposes of audit and governance, but they're recruited to join the committee. Recommendation C, there's a description of the independent member. And, wording C, the next paragraph after that sets out very clearly that the independent members will not have voting rights when they sit in audit and governance. And finally, that audit and governance committee has authority to determine the process for recruiting and appointing a co-optee and substitute. So that is the crux of the report before you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I'm taking Councillor Murphy, as long as you're happy to propose as the recommender, and I am happy to be the seconder here. Open to debate from the board. Anna, Councillor Bailey.
Just a question of clarification, if I may. I thought we were agreeing to allow one independent person, but there seems to be some wording that talks about at least one independent person. So I just wondered which it was that will be going into the Constitution.
Edwina, do you want to come back on that? Which point of that is in the...
Well, it's in the recommendations. The Combined Authority Board shall decide the size and membership of the Audit and Governance Committee and shall include at least one independent person. Everywhere else it seems to talk about one independent person.
Apologies, that's an error. It's one independent member.
Can we make that amendment? Okay. Yes, Councillor Singer.
Can I follow up on that one?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
had a similar question. So in the recommendations, it talks about to delegate the recruitment, selection and appointment of independent co-opted member, and then brackets S. I would be very happy with that if it didn't have the brackets S, and I'm just wondering if that's the same issue. And if we're just talking about one person, that's completely fine and excellent. But if the chair and the monitoring officer are planning to appoint 8, I've got more concerns about it. So can we just be clear that it's just one? Thank you.
I'm just thinking, being devil's advocate, it would be a very interesting thing if all political parties were replaced by independents. Quite what would happen then, but that's for another day.
There are many varieties of independence.
Yes, yes, indeed. Right, can we move to the vote on these recommendations A, B and C? Those in favour? Oh, sorry.
Can we just make sure we've amended the recommendations? Because there's two problems. It goes on to say if no more than one independent person is appointed, but there won't ever be. Recommendation B, it's got two issues. It's at least one independent person and if no more than one independent person.
Sorry, I think, are you looking at 14D? This is 14C.
In the next vote. All right. So we're just doing 14C, co-option of independent members. As I say, proposed second. Moving on the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? Thank you. So now we can go on to 14D, which is a slightly different nuance in terms of the independent person. Item 14D is the appointment of independent person. Edwina, if you could now present this report.
Thank you, Mayor. Perhaps I can start with the issue of at least one person. So the reason why this is drafted in this way is because at present there is one independent person who chairs audit and governance, but the legislation itself that sets out the terms of audit and governance and overview and scrutiny committee says that there can be at least one independent person. Also, if this is approved, if this report is approved, there will be now two independent persons sitting on audit and governance. So there is the chair, John Parr, at the moment. Then there will be an additional independent person making two persons. However, the reason why I've used the word at least is that leaves room for audit and governance or for the board itself to choose either one person or more independent persons every municipal year. So that's why I've used the word at least one independent person to show that there can be more than one independent person, which is what this report is about. So if I can start with that. This report is separate from the previous report in that the appointment of the independent person that we're seeking here is someone who is totally devoid of politics. They're someone who has no affiliation with a political party. They're just an independent person who is recruited and selected by advertisement. So basically, a similar person to the chair of audit and governance at present. The reason why this report has come is because of good governance, to ensure that there can be a seamless handover, as it were, succession for when the chair of audit and governance leaves. His term is due to expire in, not next year, 2025, but there needs to be someone who's sort of undershadowing him and has an opportunity to succeed. I must stress that this is not giving that person the job automatically, but because of good governance and to anticipate issues. This is why this report has been brought before the board. If this is approved today, the other independent person will not be in position until the next municipal year, so they would have at least 1 year to observe and learn from the chair as is. There are 5 recommendations. Because of time, I'll not go into all of them, but it is seeking, I think the main one that I just wanted to highlight was C, to delegate to the Executive Director of Resources and Performance and the Monitoring Office in consultation with the Chair to finalise the role description, skills, competences and person specification, which to approve the advert. So the recruitment would not come back to this board like the independent member has. That's delegated to the 3 persons I have mentioned. Unless there are any questions, I will leave it there, Mayor.
Thank you. Open to the board to ask questions. No thing. So again, on this final one, Edna, Councillor Murphy, as the lead member for governance, are you proposing the recommendation?
Yes, I am. Thank
you. I will go as seconder, and having had the opportunity to talk, we can now move to the vote on the recommendations as stated A to E. Those in favour? Those against? And those abstaining. Thank you. So again, that's gone via a majority. Sorry? All right. Yes. Sorry. Over to you, Edwina.
Yes, I apologise. I just wanted to say a very huge thank you to Councillor Murphy, who's been quite helpful with preparing all the three reports that came before the board today. Thank you, Councillor Murphy.
And I want to give my thanks to the board for being able to storm through 14 items in less than 2 hours. So that senses but we all are human. So can I propose we have a 5 at tops 10-minute break before we go into what are the final items, but obviously some significant discussion points within them. We'll take a break now for 5, possibly 10 minutes, depending on how quick people get back. Thank you. Okay, sorry, do you want to come and join us for items 15 to 18? Oh, Tim, glad to see you here. Couldn't start without you. Okay, just a few last stragglers. Okay, we have our board and we have our interim head of transport, and just to check, we are on, are we? Okay, fine, thanks. Item 15. It is the Local Transport and Connectivity Plan. It's been quite a long time in coming, and I think we all realise the importance of this as a strategic document for all of us across the whole of the region of the Combined Authority. Tim, I am absolutely sure you've done a lot of work on this, and it is now your moment to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, members. So I'm here to present the LTCP and its suite of document. It's a result of 2 years of work from the Combined Authority and constituent council officers. There have been significant amount of engagement with stakeholders, public, delivery bodies and constituent councils, including with the Business Board, who've written in support of the plan. Just to recap the update on the plan and why it needed to be progressed. So the Independent Commission on Climate recommendation on how to decarbonise the region. The Combined Authority's refreshed focus on a sustainable economic growth and how to live it even better. The COVID-19 and long-term effects on travel and people's expectations. The government's new plan to cut carbon, included within its decarbonisation plan, and a 10-point plan on the green industrial revolution, and the government new cycling and walking policies, amongst others, and also the government new policy and need to updating local transport plans and with subsequent guidance. Specifically in relation to the guidance, this has been delayed. It's now due in autumn to winter of this year, and that is a delay of nearly, it's over a year. But in line with other strategic transport authorities, such as Oxfordshire, Transport for West Midlands and Norfolk, who have all agreed their plans so over the course of the next 6 months, a detailed implementation plan will be developed over the course of the next financial year, following the agreement of the plan, and ensuring this aligned to our budgetary discussion with the MTFP that we've had previously, and government guidance when it's released. With the approval of the LTCP, we will therefore be one of the first strategic transport authorities to have a modern, up-to-date, robust plan in place, and this will put the Combined Authority in a strong position for future bidding rounds. Since the papers were submitted to the board in May, a number of minor amendments have been made to the text within the main document, and these are detailed in paragraph 3.4 of the report. In addition, Councillor Bailey has outlined that there's ambiguity in the language on page 19 of the Greater Cambridge section around the partners involved in the delivery and development of the A10, and this will be updated in due course. To conclude, we have received policy feedback from peers, subnational transport bodies, neighbouring authorities and government on the quality and content of the LTCP, especially in relation to the quality and alignment to the plan, the overarching aims and aspirations of the area and national priorities. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, Tim. 708 pages. It's open to debate. Okay, Councillor Bailey. Anna.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification, Tim. I think actually it was my misreading of it, in fact. I've just emailed Steve. Huge amount of work gone into this document. It's billed to us today as a vision-led approach. It's a strategic document. It affects the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. The document places a number of options on the table, some of which are subject to agreement by the Highways Authority. So for Peterborough, that's Peterborough City Council. For all other constituent local authorities, that's Cambridgeshire County Council that has the jurisdiction. The thrust of this document is set out on page 18, which talks about avoid, shift, improve. And that section refers to demand management, both physical interventions and demand management pricing interventions. I believe that both of those are regressive. They're designed to punish motorists. They're not necessarily always wrong. You know, I think toll roads for brand new roads and that sort of thing are open for discussion. And clearly sometimes physical interventions are right, but not ones that seek to reduce and restrict access. The document makes it clear that although the table detailing the specifics of these measures has been removed from an earlier draft, that the measures remain, and the measures are area-wide road user charging, cordon-based road user charging, so that's like a sustainable travel zone, access and capacity constraints, so that's shutting down and restricting our highways, workplace parking levy, and parking price strategies. The forward by the Mayor sets out the vision, seeking to make public transport the natural choice. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. I wholeheartedly support it. It also states that this plan will make public transport more attractive. However, it's the manner in which it seeks to do that I can't agree with. That the manner is negative, punitive, regressive measures that I just can't support. What we need across our geography is a 21st century turn-up-and-go style public transport system that's fast, cheap, reliable, efficient and safe, and so that people want to use it instead of getting in their car. I feel it's woefully unambitious for our county. We're the only area outside of London that's a net contributor to the Treasury. Cambridgeshire subsidises the rest of the country. This plan supports the Greater Cambridge Partnership's Making Connections congestion charging project. And I think that the rail section is underdeveloped, as are the elements relating to mass transport options. I'm concerned about the value for money assessments and how this could adversely affect rural areas, and we need to be very careful not to let that happen. And I would ask the CPCA to give consideration to committing to using its resources only outside of the Greater Cambridge area, given that Greater Cambridge itself has the city deal money, many hundreds of millions of pounds in the form of the Greater Cambridge Partnership. And in fact, that is how the city deal was sold to Cambridgeshire, that the rest of the money would be available outside of Greater Cambridge because Greater Cambridge had the city deal cash. I simply can't support the Greater Cambridge section. It openly supports the GCP's Making Connections congestion charging proposals, and it even includes the future bus network graphic, which extends into every constituent authority's area except Peterborough. Leaving road charging on the table, indeed positively pursuing road charging, is wrong. The people have said no. I understand Peterborough City Council has said no. We all know that Cambridge City Council, South Cambs District Council and Cambridgeshire County Council are about to say no. East Cambs and Fenland District Councils have said no. Why would we pass a document today that has road charging at its heart if no one around the table supports it? Or is it the case that people around the table do support road charging? Make no mistake, a vote for this document is a vote for road charging. We need to give the people a break. It's clear that we don't have their permission. And if you won't do it for the people, then maybe you'll do it for self-preservation. A vote for this is a vote to pursue road charging and other regressive measures. And make no mistake, I put you on notice that this is the case. This will be an election issue, I assure you of that. Let's not pass a document that will be out of date in literally 8 days' time when the GCP takes road charging in Cambridge off the table. There's so much in this document to be positive about, so let's go for a transport system that's fit for 21st century Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, not one that's taking us back to the dark ages. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Bowden.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm pleased that you called Councillor Bailey first, because she made very many of the points I wanted to make, but probably far more eloquently than I would have been able to make them. I share Councillor Bailey's belief that there are a lot of things within this document which are good, but there are some real problems, and I think there are missed opportunities. There is still a one-size-fits-all approach, which I believe is inappropriate, and we are failing to recognise some recent developments. As far as missed opportunities are concerned, I'm really disappointed to see the lack of forward thinking here in terms of where we are going to be in 10, 15, 20, 30 years' time. I'm really disappointed because we should be looking at strategic planning as far as these matters are concerned. When the previous mayor put me in charge of the strategic planning post within the combined authority. I was, and I think to this day I'm probably still the only member of this board who's openly said and advocated that there is a limited time for private motor cars to be utilised in this country and in this area. The economic justification for continuing to have private motor cars has a limited shelf life, and we need to be planning for that. But we also need to be recognising how that's going to happen. And that's why I was so disappointed to see, even after the comments which have been made previously, that there is relatively little, there's only a few small passages talking about connected and autonomous vehicles and talking about smart roads. What this document does, it provides yesterday's solutions for today's problems rather than looking for tomorrow's opportunities to address tomorrow's challenges. And that is very disappointing in terms of its overall scope. The one-size-fits-all problem has been made before, and the fact that there are various appendices in here for each individual area doesn't change what's in the LTCP strategic document, which is the important document. And yes, the wording has been changed, as Councillor Bailey has said. Some of the specific advocacy of things like road charging is no longer mentioned. But we see words such as fiscal measures in there, which are just weasel words, making it quite clear that the intent remains the same, even if some of the more objectionable individual words have been removed. And when we advocate road space reallocation, modal filters to reduce traffic volumes, and traffic disappearance, what we are advocating here is deliberately squeezing cars off the road using physical and pricing interventions. And that's what this paper is saying. And ultimately, it's not appropriate for the whole of the combined authority area to proceed along that path, and especially to proceed along that path at the same speed. And if individual district councils had the opportunity to have a real say in the progression of this document, I'd be far less unhappy, because what's appropriate in Cambridge City isn't appropriate in Fenland, but we nevertheless could and should have the ability, as a combined authority, supposedly of constituent councils, to be able to influence that effectively. However, within Cambridgeshire, it is only the Highways Authority which is actually being given the authority to do things as far as this document is concerned. And then when we look at failing to recognise the recent developments which have happened, I'd look at page 28 and what the document says about buses. And it says, and I'll slightly paraphrase this, achieving the desired outcomes will rely on the delivery of a programme of evidence-based interventions. Significant capital and revenue funding sources will need to be identified from various sources to reach our ambition. And that specifically included the Greater Cambridge Partnership Making Connections project. Now, already this document, even in its current form a few months ago, was very worrying because it failed to identify where most of the money was going to be coming from to push forward the agenda for the document as a whole. But in the last few days and weeks, if I'm to believe what I read in the Cambridge Independent at least, it looks as though one of the mainstays of what was being planned for the financing of it, that is the Making Connections project, is falling apart. Now, I don't know the truth of all of this. We'll only find out when various meetings take place in the forthcoming days and weeks. But increasingly, this is looking like a lame duck turning into a dead duck so far as the financing is concerned. And if we produce a document with no means of financing what is being proposed, then it's a meaningless document in itself. I can't in its current form support this, but I want to support a lot of the very good things which are within it, and I do hope that we'd be able to have some degree of consensus in future, means of which we'd be able together to be able to move forward with all the positive things here. But in its current form, especially given that it's not financed, and especially given that the war on motorists continues to be mentioned within this, I wouldn't be able to support it. And just on that point on war on motorists, which I mentioned at a previous meeting, and I know you reacted to, Mayor, but I took that out to my electors and said, this is what's happening. And I was surprised by their reaction. They didn't actually agree with me that this is an ideological matter. They saw it as being a simple matter of the authorities, by which in this case they meant the Mayor and the combined authority, the authorities looking at every way they can just to tax more and to put more burdens on ordinary working families, and they saw motorists were being regarded as being a soft touch. So that was the reaction I got back from the people in Whittlesea, and I thought that reaction may be helpful to you, Mayor, in my reporting it back to you.
You are correct in that war on motorists is a very loaded comment. I prefer to look at this as more a revolution for public transport. But who else would like to speak here? Okay, next hand up is from Councillor Nessinger.
Thank you. I find the two interventions we've just had incredibly disappointing. I'm not particularly surprised, but I am very disappointed. This is not a document that is entirely based on road pricing. It's been very clear and very carefully worded to make it the case that it is not based on road pricing, because it's been clear for some time that any decision on road pricing or any future of that is very uncertain, and it is even more uncertain, in fact, even highly unlikely to be going ahead at the moment. There is an extraordinary amount of extremely positive work that has gone into this document, really detailed work on what is needed for every disparate area of our combined authority place. It is really recognised in this document, and it's one of its great benefits, the way in which each district and each place has been looked at individually, and the important things for those places have been recognised, and the differences between them also recognised. And I think it's extremely unfortunate that all of that painstaking work to look at the detail of our different areas has just been wiped out because of a political charade about a campaign and a war against motorists. I mean, it makes me really angry. On a whole range of different levels, but one of the most important is that not only is this a kind of junking of any pretense that Conservatives might have had to take any interest in climate change, and that's clearly something that's not just going on in this chamber but is going on nationally today, but it's also a massive betrayal of the very large number of our population in every single district and authority here, of people who cannot afford to drive or are unable to drive because of disability issues or age. And for those people, not investing in public transport leaves them trapped in their houses, trapped in small communities, unable, and particularly here, I'm really aware of the difficulties of this for older people who are not able to access healthcare easily because there isn't a decent bus service. But also, I'm afraid, and I'm sorry to say this, but as Chair of Skills, it's kind of my job, even more importantly for our young people who are not able to get to have choice about their future employment and their future skills opportunities, because all that's available is what's in their village. And because they can't afford to drive. And any of you who may or may not have investigated trying to get driving lessons, the cost of getting a young person insured on a car, driving is just unaffordable for an enormous number of people who are under 25 or 30. And by neglecting our public transport system and not investing sufficiently in our active travel, we will be making sure that those young people do not have the opportunities that are available in other parts of our system. And as somebody whose children have grown up in Cambridge with all the freedom of the fantastic cycling infrastructure that city has to offer, I want to make sure that those opportunities are also available to people in Ely, to people in St Neots, to people in St Ives and Gamlingay and Whittlesea. I don't see any of that in the obsession that some of the members of this board seem to have with making sure that motorists have the right to drive absolutely where they want, when they want, without paying for parking even. And I think that to be rejecting this excellent document for political reasons makes me very cross, and I hope we will not do it. And I know that rests on one member of this board, and we have yet to hear from him. Thank you.
Well, we were working as a board, and there is, as you say, some specific members of the board have particular important voting rights on any transport issue. I'm willing to take, Councillor Smith.
Going to get used to hitting the right button on these in a minute. Thank you, Mayor. I haven't come with a pre-prepared speech. I didn't know that was what we were doing in these sessions. I regret the attempts to politicise this debate today. I believe that those attempts to politicise this day absolutely minimises the incredibly thorough piece of work that has gone on here. And to accuse, in effect, officers of being driven by a political agenda when I know that they have worked incredibly hard to produce something that is best for our region is just very disappointing. I think it's also worth pointing out and reminding us at board of the amount of engagement that has taken place here. Every single council has had a significant impact on this. I know from my own experience at Cambridge City the number of times that the Cambridge City appendix has come to us. I know that will be the case with all the appendices right across the region. I'm keeping a tally of the number of times this has come to formal and semi-formal meetings. I believe we are now at 4 board meetings, 7 Transport and Infrastructure Committee meetings, and 10 leaders' strategy meetings. To suggest that there has not been consultation and engagement on this is laughable, to be honest. I think the other thing we do have to remember is we are going through currently a improvement process. One of the things that has been mentioned at that improvement process is the fact that we, as a board, need to take responsibility that we are the combined authority. As constituent councils, we sit on this board. If there are key transport decisions that need taking in the future, they will come through this board. The combined authority is not another thing that happens outside of this board meeting. We are the combined authority. And I say that because I think that should give us real a sense that we don't have to worry that there's something in a document that might mean that the combined authority makes a decision without us, because we are that authority. Now, to reassure Councillor Bowden, we have a paper coming up later setting in train the specific due diligence around buses that he is asking for. Clearly, we wish to be financially prudent in all that we do. And there is no way, I'm sure, that any of us would want to embark down the stages of bus reform without being sure that we're doing due diligence at every stage, and that's exactly what the paper that has gone to TIC recently is designed to do, and I do hope that board members will be able to support that later. Mayor, I wonder if it might be helpful, because we had a very concerned question from a local resident at the Transport and Infrastructure Committee around whether we were planning to impose congestion charging on Peterborough. And I gave an answer there. I wonder, given that that issue has been raised again, whether it might be helpful to kind of give that answer again. Okay. So what I emphasise there, and I will seek to summarise rather than read out the entire thing, is that the decision lies on a congestion charge with the relevant constituent council. In that case, in terms of the question that was asked at TIC, Peterborough City Council, it is up to the constituent council to decide whether or not to introduce a congestion charge. Now, I emphasised in that answer that this draft local transport and connectivity plan that is before us today sets out a range of possible measures that could be taken across our region. They are simply an attempt to outline a menu which is neither compulsory nor exhaustive. And many of those measures would require by law the express buy-in of the relevant local highways authorities. In the case of charging, that relevant highways authority is Peterborough City Council or Cambridgeshire County Council. The combined authority has no plan to ask Peterborough to consider charging. The decision as whether to accept that request, even if it were made, would of course lie squarely with Peterborough, and the same is obviously true with the County Council as well. And Peterborough voting, or any other council voting to allow the LTCP to pass, would not change any of that, because all it does is set out a basket of possible measures authorities may choose to use. It does not in any way override the powers of those local authorities, and I'm sure Edwina would be the first person to jump in and tell us we couldn't do that if we sought to try. I think it's important to emphasise, because this may not be clear for everybody listening in, that mayoral powers differ around the country. In London, the Mayor has greater power on highways issues. That is not the case here. Any comparison that therefore people may choose to make with London is actually not a helpful one in this situation because the powers are different. Now, the GCP board was mentioned. I think it is important to address that. I addressed that in my answer on Wednesday last week as well. The Combined Authority Mayor does not have a voting position on the GCP board. The Combined Authority Mayor has been clear all along that the decision of Cambridgeshire, Cambridge City and South Cambs as part of that board as to whether, as a joint committee of councils, they recommend that the county council pursue a charge in Greater Cambridgeshire is their decision as a joint committee. It is not the decision of the Combined Authority Board or the Combined Authority Mayor. I'm sure all of us in this room respect whatever decision the GCP Board will come to because it is their decision. So to repeat, it is for the County Council, Cambridgeshire County Council or Peterborough City Council to decide whether charges are introduced, and nothing in this document overrides that. Thank you, Mayor. I hope that was a helpful intervention.
Well, as lead member for Transport, I think it was important that you had the time to speak. Al, I know you've kindly written to me already about the business board's voice here would be important, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Not necessarily ideal timing to take a position knowing the sensitivities that exist on a regional basis around some of the schemes and approaches, particularly when it comes to what I would refer to as physical transport, because I think sometimes we forget within this plan this is both a physical and a digital plan in terms of our connectivity and transport. The Business Board have discussed this at length because fundamentally transport and communication underpins almost every strategy that we look at for economic growth. And with that in mind, I was absolutely keen that we would have a separate conversation about that, and I would seek consensus from Business Board members to share back to this group here, recognising the different sensitivities. I have to say, as members of the Business Board, we had a different independent perception of what this framework offers. And I think the key on the plan is that it is a framework, not an instruction of action. And we looked at it very much from the scope of it providing the baseline of which it provides a catalyst to build and further develop specific interventions, specific opportunities on a regional basis, which does not undermine the ultimate decision-making in different regions. We did feel there is need post this agreement, this policy, to further develop clarity about what are the key economic transport priorities, the ones that have the biggest impact. It's very easy to see there are lots of places where investment could be done on transport, but which ones actually unlock. We also said, much as has been alluded to, given this is a framework, we need to have some what-ifs based on the variability of potential funding streams that come into this particular remit based on external projects. I appreciate this might sound very much the simplistic approach, but our view from an economic driver is businesses wanting to grow in the area will look for places where there is a place to build a business and where people can come to work. Some will be digital in this new hybrid area, some will drive, some will bus, some will train. Fundamentally, the number of people are wishing to arrive at a single point of day will dictate whether there are transport flow issues or not, and that will be down to local interventions as to what is most appropriate. Clearly, every region across the combined authority has very different infrastructure and very different ways they could mitigate that. I don't believe that is in any way shaped by the transport plan. Quite the opposite. It simply provides opportunities which will need to be developed for each and every region. Because of the sensitivities, I made a point of having, a separate meeting with the Business Board, seeking separately their feedback and writing to the Mayor with our consolidated view in advance of this conversation. And so from that point of view, we articulated that the Business Board does absolutely support this plan, and it's the first step in what needs to be some considerable work subsequently to refine for each region.
Councillor Comboy has indicated I'd be keen also to hear from all members of the board on this thing, but Councillor Comboy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also looked at this as a broad framework. One of our real challenges is we live in a dynamic, changing environment. What you write today might not be quite what we're dealing with tomorrow, but we've got to put something in terms of our vision and the framework about where we're going. I didn't read it as a very prescriptive document that said we had to do all of these things. I'm really encouraged, and I'd like to thank officers who took on board the concerns we had in Huntingdonshire, because that one-size-fits-all is genuinely a concern. I know Councillor Bowden and I have both spoken about that, because the geography of our areas, the connectivity of our areas, where people need to travel to, how they need to travel, is problematic. Those of us who have very rural areas, I would love to be in a position that we have bus services everywhere, but there are some real practicalities around some of those deliveries, and we still struggle with some of that. I very much look forward to the day when actually there is a genuine choice everywhere. But I genuinely think that this document takes us that step forward. I see it very much as a framework that's up for continual discussion and review. We've changed a lot in the last 3 or 4 years. 3 or 4 years' time, how our economy works, how our residents choose to get about, the opportunities that are in front of them, I hope will have changed again in a very positive way. And I think the real challenge is having a framework that allows us to be dynamic and responsive. And without a framework, we're not in a position to move forward effectively and in collaboration. I am very comfortable that those decisions will continue to come back through here, that we'll continue to have the opportunity to work together to shape those outcomes, and that we will also be able to speak very clearly about the outcomes of our particular constituent councils. So I'm comfortable with this document. I don't see it as so prescriptive that it takes us down a particular path, because I would have the similar pushback in my own council. But I do think it's a very constructive way of stepping forward and trying to work out how we make a truly available set of alternative travel arrangements for everybody to be able to use. I would like people to have genuine choice to be able to use public transport everywhere at every opportunity, because I think a lot of people would like that choice and don't necessarily feel they have that at the moment. So I'm very supportive of this document. I haven't read it in quite the same way some of my colleagues have, but I also hear about the real challenge for our economic development, because if we cannot move potential workforces around, we will not grow our economy in the way that we all aspire to. It is probably our biggest lever for better opportunities and outcomes for our residents. So I will see where this debate takes us, but I'm very supportive of this as a facilitator for us moving forward together.
Okay. I'm sorry, no, Darryl, do you want to come in? Police and Crime Commissioner, Darryl Preston.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to keep this brief and on my remit. I am pleased for once we see safety featuring here. I've come across other reports from both local authorities, GCP, where it's frankly been a little bit of an afterthought, and I think there is a requirement for all the agencies to come together. And when looking at transport and transport infrastructure, I'm not just talking about roads here, but putting safety high up the agenda, as we would with health and any other issue, particularly in Cambridgeshire, where we know we have a significant number of fatal and serious injury road traffic collisions. Although they are down since 2019, there's still far too many. But just one observation I would make. When we talk about safety within our transport infrastructure, I think also we should be talking about crime prevention. So, I mean, for example, if we talk about cycle routes and cycleways, well, people won't be using them if they know at the end of it they're going to have their bicycle stolen, which too often is the case. Our buses, for example, we've made a bid into the Home Office to be able to train many of our stagecoach bus drivers around violence against women and girls, so they can spot those issues and report to police. But I think this needs to be embedded in everything we do within our local transport plan, is think safety and think crime prevention.
From the Integrated Care Board.
Mayor, thank you. I mean, clearly there's a very strong connection here to the work that we collectively do at the Integrated Care Partnership, and obviously around that table, lots of the individual views that have been expressed here can be heard. As a board, Integrated Care Board, whilst we haven't explicitly looked at this, quite clearly we are interested in access for patients, connectivity, but also, as I said earlier, for our workforce. So there are specific elements of this that, as I said earlier, we would like to engage in, but as a framework, I think it provides us with that opportunity to have that conversation and link it to the wider work that we're doing.
Thank you, John. John Williams from South Cambridgeshire. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Cambridgeshire and Peterborough are quite unique in that it's so diverse in terms of transport. We have very rural areas, we have urban areas. We need all the tools in the toolbox to help us deliver a sustainable transport network. To eliminate or not to use all those tools will be of great disadvantage, because in urban areas we do need to restrict cars in order for the vast majority, in order to enable mass transportation to be reliable and punctual, because our roads in our cities are not designed to enable public transport to run freely. You know, we don't have you know, the opportunity, particularly in Cambridge City, for example, where we have quite narrow roads, we don't have the opportunity to enable buses to be separated from cars, for example. On the other hand, in rural areas, we have some extremely rural areas with hamlets, people living in very remote places where, you know, mass transit is not the answer and could never be the answer. So we have to look at opportunities there for people who aren't able to drive, to give them the opportunity of enabling them to get about and have the same opportunities as those who can drive. So we need to look at some other solution for them, such as, for example, community transport or DRT. So we need to have in our plan all aspects of transport policy and infrastructure. And this is what this plan does. It's not prescriptive for every district, but it does set out all the tools that we have available to help us decide what is best for a particular part of our combined authority area. So to suggest that we should leave out things such as, you know, physical restraints on cars or road pricing is to tie one hand behind our back and not enable us to ensure that we have looked for the best solution for our communities wherever they live within this combined authority area. So I certainly support this plan. It's not, as someone else has said, it's not a prescriptive plan. We're not expecting everyone to use every tool in the box, but we want people to use those that are appropriate for where they live. And, you know, in Cambridge, it certainly is a matter of trying to do something about the congestion in Cambridge, which also, of course, impacts on air quality. And it also enables us to do something about those people that live out in remote areas, in the Fens, for example, where they require just as much right to transport as someone in a city if they don't own a car. So I sort of fully support this plan.
Okay, there's two members of the board who haven't spoken. That's Councillor Murphy and Councillor Fitzgerald. I'm giving you the opportunity to speak. Do you want to speak to this, Edna?
I'm very supportive of this plan. It seems to me very insightful, thorough, and enabling piece of work, and I support my colleagues' observations on it. Thank you very much for all the work that's been done on it.
Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald, obviously there was particular reference to the importance of the support from Peterborough City Council and indeed Cambridgeshire County Council as highways authorities. I'm asking if you would like to speak on the paper. Okay. No. I've let everybody have an opportunity to speak for an allotted, relatively equal period of time. And on all sides, I've heard different supportive opinions and those against. I am not planning to take any further conversation or discussion on the matters. I think points have been made for and against, which are obviously heartfelt, but I don't think there's any benefit in us now exploring that any further, because I think as a board we have to move forward together. And it may be that it's difficult for some board members to agree with all of that is on the table. Is my chair's prerogative to kind of summarise up some of the situation, but I would refute that anything in this is about a war on motorists. I really don't like that phrase, and as I say, I counteract it with a revolution on public transport. I do think there are options within this paper which do offer up that turn up and go. I've been turning up and going on a bus for many years, and with the investment and some of the really impressive stuff that's been put forward by transport officers in the papers that will follow this, and the ambition for electrification of the bus fleet in Peterborough, the idea of a whole full network review, I can see what we are doing here is getting the basics right. I absolutely, and you can check on everything I've ever said, I'm not against the ambition of really thinking of some really innovative modern strategies to go forward. Mass transit, light rail, trams, and not just thinking about that for the cities, but also we've talked at length about options that could provide unique forms of capability and connectivity for Wisbech to March and March to Chatteris. At the moment, we have to get the basics right, and I am being unashamed about why we have to prioritise this document with a particular focus on getting public transport. And what is the form of transport that most of the public use? It's buses. And too many times over decades, all governments of all colours have left people behind and haven't cared. So, we've all had an opportunity to speak. I am fully behind this document and want to talk to the dedication, hard work of all the officers who've put this together over a very long period of time, and always in full consultation with officers of all constituent authorities and between our members. Ultimately, we need to pass this, because, as has been highlighted, showing ambition, which we have in bucket loads here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, is seen in this document. So, I'm now proposing to go to the vote, unless one person makes a final comment. Okay, we go to the vote. Sorry, I'm moving the recommendation from the chair, and I will take the seconder as Councillor Nsinga. Those in favour of, and I'm just going to read it out in full because I think it deserves it. The recommendation is to approve the local transport and connectivity plan. The second one, B, which actually does acknowledge what the business board mentioned, recognise that the LTCP may require a review and some revision on receipt of the guidance from central government, and of course ongoing working together with us all, business board and all constituent authorities. And it is important to note that in the voting, a vote in favour has to be by at least 2/3 of all members appointed by their constituent councils, and it must include the members appointed by Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council. It has to be a simple majority of voting members. So on that note, I'm going to move to the vote. Those in favour of the two recommendations... Oh, sorry. B is just a simple majority and A is 2/3. Okay. Yeah. So, I'm sorry, I apologise. We have to do it in thing. We have to do A is approve the local transport connectivity plan, but it will require, as I say, the membership of the county council and the city council. Those in favour? Those against? Okay. So on that, the LTCP recommendation A has not been approved. And we now move to recommendation B, which is to recognise that the LTCP may require review and some revision on receipt of guidance from the central government. But in some ways, is that actually relevant if we've not actually passed it? Okay, so we now move on. Sorry, Councillor Bowden.
My apologies, Mayor. I'm not feeling terribly well. I must leave the meeting. I do apologise.
That's okay. Okay, I'm just going to propose that we have a 5 to 10 minute break. And there is a lunch. So we're actually going to 5 to 1. We're going to have a lunch break for 20, 25 minutes. So if you could come back by 20 past, sorry, 1:15, please. and Employment Committee, Transport and Infrastructure Committee, and recommendation from the Business Board. There are some important items which I'm sure we will want to discuss. However, if we move to item 16, which is, let me just, get myself right, recommendations from the Skills and Employment Committee. Now, very pleased to say that these were all approved unanimously by the Skills and Employment Committee on the 4th of September. And as these recommendations have already been debated in detail by our subject experts on the Skills and Employment Committee, I propose on this one we are able to move directly to the vote en bloc unless anyone objects. And these with issues to the skills boot camps and the UK SPF skills projects mobilisation, the brokerage service. Has anybody got any objections if we just move to en bloc? Lucy, Councillor Singer, are you happy to propose the recommendations from these reports? And I am very happy, having enjoyed the meeting, to be the seconder there. Moving on the vote of these recommendations. Those in favour? Those against? And those abstaining? Thank you. Right, so 17, this is recommendations from the Transport and Infrastructure Committee. Now, these have been already debated in detail and approved by subject experts on the Transport and Infrastructure Committee last week. But as they include items of significant public interest, I propose that we deal with each separately. First up on the is electric vehicles with Emma White, Transport Programme Manager, who will present this report. Sorry, thank you, Emma.
Hi everyone. The Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund, also called the Levi Fund, has two main objectives: to deliver a step change in the deployment of local, primarily low power on-street charging infrastructure, and to accelerate the commercialisation of and the investment in the local charging infrastructure sector. In March 2023, the Combined Authority was successful in securing 88,000 under the Levi Capability Fund. The Levi Capability Fund can be used to finance the staff and expertise needed to deliver this EV infrastructure and strategy. Later that month, an indicative allocation to the Combined Authority was made of over 5 million capital and 400,000 capability funding under the same funding for the next 2 years. In August, the Combined Authority was successful for the bid for the 400,000 capability fund. The 5 million for installation is under the capital fund, and tranche 2 for this has been entered. Next year, a detailed application for this funding will need to be submitted. It has been made clear as part of this funding that collaboration drives scale and can increase the amount of private investment leveraged into all these EV projects. The Combined Authority are working as one team with the higher authorities to progress this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Can I open this up? Does anybody want to talk on this? No. So, Anna, as the lead member for Transport, are you happy to propose the recommendation?
Very happy to, yes.
Okay. I will second it, having been at the meeting as well. Voting on the recommendations. Those in favour? Those against? And those abstaining? Thank you. Emma, thank you for that. Good luck. Important work to do. Now I'm going to invite for the next item, in 17, this is the bus network review with Neil Byers, who's been doing sterling work as a transport consultant for the Combined Authority, presenting the report. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, everybody. So there's two papers in relation to buses today. The second one relates to the medium and long-term future for buses and how they're governed under bus reform. This first one focuses on the more immediate term about the investment into tendered bus services, which the Combined Authority undertakes. In October last year, the Combined Authority invested significantly more to ensure that bus services remained following withdrawal from Stagecoach. At the same time, the Authority wanted to undertake a review of all tendered bus services to ensure that they're meeting a community need and providing value for money. This paper sets out the initial recommendations of that work, where 51 of the services are meeting those needs, and there's 18 that we think we need to review to find opportunities to improve those services. There are 7 services where we're still gathering the information in order to assess those on the same basis. The paper also sets out the work around the TING demand responsive service so that we can consider that alongside our scheduled services. It sets out some of the considerations for the future of demand responsive in a broader sense. It also sets out some of the considerations about bus service improvement plan plus funding, which is available to the authority, which we brought back in November for further consideration alongside investment in bus services and other opportunities. I'll stop there and take any questions.
So just to, this is on the review, or are we going to the reform? Just the review at the moment. Okay, so we'll keep it to the review papers. Sorry. John, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. As Neil knows, I'm quite, I want to know when we go out to consult on this, when we go out and discuss this with our communities, I want us to have an alternative to put to them. So I don't want us to be able to go out and say, you know, your bus service, it doesn't meet, you know, there are not enough passengers using your service to meet our criteria, you know, so you know, we can't justify continuing running it, so it's going to stop. What I'd like to see is you come with a proposal to say, and so in these circumstances, this is what we propose to provide as an alternative, you know, because, you know, one of these services is in my ward. It only runs twice a week, but it's very important for people to go and do their shopping in Newmarket from some very small villages. Okay, it might not, a conventional service running twice a week may not be the way that we can accommodate or serve these people, but they still need some means of transport to get them to go to Newmarket to do their shopping. So I think when we meet communities, I think we need to have an alternative there to offer them instead of continuing to run a conventional bus service.
Any other further comments? Anna, Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is a really emotive and difficult subject, and we've grappled with this at board in the past because, you know, it is very difficult when it's a bus service in your patch and you've got residents clamouring that desperately need it. But the reality is that, you know, we have to try and take an overarching view of all of this and get best bang for the combined authorities buck, frankly. I just think it'd be remiss to let the opportunity to go by without saying a massive thank you to Neil and others in the team and Steve, because they've made massive efforts to come out and engage with us directly at the district councils to keep us informed of what's going on, what the outcome of all of this looks like, and the way that things are moving. So I want to thank them very much for that. I think the engagement around, you know, the services that are looked to be reviewed is incredibly important, and, you know, officers don't necessarily know what and who to engage with, so it's incumbent on local members from the constituent authorities, I think, to help with that process and point officers in the right direction so that they can set up good engagement opportunities. And just in relation to the extension of the TING, I mean, I think, you know, it's no secret that TING is incredibly expensive per passenger journey. It's the single most expensive bus service that we pay for in the Combined Authority. I will support extending it to March so that we can, you know, align it with the timing of the rest, and, you know, it will go through. I have been assured by officers that it will go through the same review processes, you know, because we have to spend our money wisely, and basically this is about putting on services that as many people as possible want to use. And that's the balance that we're trying to get here. It's not going to be easy. You know, we've had punch-ups in the past about individual bus services. Difficult choices will have to be made. But, you know, we all want buses. We all want more of them. We all want better. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Anna, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. My thanks to the team for this and for the previous paper as well. I think this is modelling what effective transport leadership can look like. It's a very different way of looking at our network, at ensuring we have the right network. There's a strong focus on community engagement, on being strategic, on assessing value in a much broader way, that real emphasis on community value. I'm very impressed to see that very long period of discussion and research that we've put in place here. Both councillors that spoke raised the issue of community engagement, and that's been a consistent theme, I think, in certainly our discussions, but also the discussions in Transport and Infrastructure Committee as well. So I'm very reassured as Chair of TIC that we will get strong community engagement here, plenty of meaningful discussion and debate, and I'm also aware that we are looking at assessing routes that maybe aren't on here at all, that might be ones we can put forward as part of this review, and I think that's also extremely welcome. So thank you for all the work that's been done. I absolutely commend this paper to the board.
Thank you, Anna. No further desire to speak. So, as I say, this is on the bus network review. There are report recommendations to approve the extension of 51 bus service contracts to March 2025 and an extension of the TIN contract to March 2024. You're proposing the recommendations, Anna? And I am seconding them. So we move on these recommendations. Those in favour? Those against? And those abstaining? Thank you. That's passed by a majority. So we now move on to, thank you, Neil, for that. Bus reform. If you could present this report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So this report sets out recommendations about moving through the process of assessing the options of enhanced partnerships or franchising. We've reached a stage in the process where we have a draft business case, which is provided in the exempt report, and the next step in the process is to have that business case audited before coming back to the board with further recommendations around those options alongside an auditor's report, which will provide you information on the credibility and valuability of the information which the business case is based on. It's a fairly technical but very important step in the process. And when we come back to the board, we'll make further recommendations and discussion about the potential for a public consultation before any decisions are made around adopting either of those governance approaches for bus services. I'll stop there.
Okay, going to open this one up to debate. No one? No one? Yeah, well, to be fair, I know, Neil, you've had a lot of consultation with us all, and it's been well trailed in terms of leader strategy meetings, so maybe that's a good sign that we're going in the right direction. So, well, in that case, Anna, again, as lead member for Transport, are you happy to propose that recommendation for these reports?
Absolutely am, and I think that the focus on due diligence here is very welcome.
And as a very keen to be the seconder, because as we move forward, bus reform, when all it means, be it enhanced partnership or franchising, these are things getting moving a little bit closer. We're on that journey, so can we move to the vote? Those in favour? Those against? And an abstention, so we carry that by a majority. Then we move to what, well, so thinking about this, we've got the depot for electric buses in Peterborough, and there's obviously a recommendation here for a drawdown of money to go to the City Council of Peterborough to approach that. But I was at the Transport and Infrastructure Committee meeting last week, and my recollection was it was going to be important that which we had the LTCP in place so that we could move on with a lot of our kind of plans around the development of, certainly the electrification of the fleet and that work with Peterborough City Council. So on this occasion, I'm going to make a proposal, if that's okay with you, that we have to withdraw this paper because it becomes, we can't talk about it now because we haven't got an LTCP in situ. Can I'm making that as a proposal as chair. So I'll take a second if that's the case, and then okay, a seconder from Councillor Smith. Yes, point of clarity, Anna.
Well, my question is it technically correct and lawful to pass this without with the current local transport plan that we have in place? I don't believe the two are linked in any way. This is outrageous behaviour.
Do you want to?
Thank you, Mayor. With regards to the legality, I would need some support from the transport team, but in light of the Constitution, Chapter 6, which deals with decision making, some of the things that need to be present for the board to make a decision are that due consultation is done, which should include the taking of relevant professional advice. That's why I'm seeking the help of the transport team to confirm the connection between the LTCP and the context of the LTCP. Also, there needs to be clarity of aims and desired outcomes. There needs to be consideration of the outcome of any consultation. Relevant matters need to be taken into account. If that includes the LTCP, then the proper decision making would not have taken place today. Due weight will need to be given to all material considerations. If that includes the LTCP, then my legal advice would be to withdraw and go back and make sure that all material considerations are provided. It needs to be lawful, and all decisions should be evidence-based. I'm not a transport expert. I'm just speaking with regard to the law. I'll leave the transport matters.
I will come back in a moment, but just in regard to obviously my memory of what happened at the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, I have actually got the point that was made in item 9.2, that the success of the bus depot project is explicitly linked with the approval of the local transport and connectivity plan, as this document provides the strategic policy position and commitment from the combined authority and partners to continue to develop alternative fuelled vehicles, including buses. In addition, the LTCP and the bus strategy, child document of the plan, strengthens the authority's position around improving the delivery framework and operating environment for buses across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. LTCP will also significantly strengthen the case to government for additional funding required to deliver the depot. So that was a point that was made very clearly at the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, where all members, including Peterborough City Council, agreed to it. So I'm saying that stands for me for the evidence why I'm making the point today. Councillor Fitzgerald.
It's ridiculous. It seems a little bit related to the previous decision about the LCTP. My advice would be to push this through. I have the bus minister coming to see me tomorrow, and this will not look good at all on you, Mr. Mayor. And it may also put in jeopardy some of the, shall we say, credibility of the combined authority about their commitment to buses and the electrification of the network. There is an LCTP already in place, and this work is advanced. And I would just advise you to vote this through, which is what presumably all the officers have been working towards. Thank you.
I will come to Councillor Smith.
Well, I mean, this is a situation none of us want to be in, quite frankly. This is an incredibly disappointing proposal to have to second. I really would rather we aren't in this position. But 9.2 in the paper that was presented to TIC is extremely clear. And I made that point in TIC last week. And I don't think it can be clearer. I mean, Councillor Fitzgerald mentioned that this seems to be connected to the previous vote. Well, it's there in black and white. The success of the bus depot project is explicitly linked with the approval of the local transport and connectivity plan. Now, I am not, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor Nick, but I don't think you are either, suggesting that this is pulled forever. But I think we need due diligence now, and I think we need a report that comes back to this committee that explains very clearly what the impact of the previous vote on the LTCP is, so that we can make the clear decision on this and we can make the correct decision with the information in front of us. We don't have that in front of us right now. So I think this is incredibly disappointing that we're in this position, but the papers are very clear in front of us.
I'm just waiting here for Councillor Fitzgerald. Anna, do you want to speak? You're okay. So, Councillor Fitzgerald, you're leaving now.
I have to be elsewhere, sorry.
But you're leaving.
This item, and basically needed to propose for all the other things.
No, all transport matters, but on this one, obviously, on reflection, as I came to this, I was reminded of this situation of the TIC committee. No, Councillor Bailey wants to speak.
Do we or do we not have a local transport plan in place in this authority? I was under the impression it was a statutory document and we have an existing document. It includes buses. This is ridiculous. This is the Mayor voting against a new bus depot funding for Peterborough as a punishment for Wayne and the fact that Wayne didn't support the local transport plan. This is outrageous.
Councillor Bailey, in answer to your question, I will ask Officer Tim Bailey to give you an officer's response, and I will.
So in answer to Councillor Bailey's point, yes, we do. The current LTP remained the policy position for the authority. So everything contained in there. Within the current LTP, there is no mention of the bus. For clarity, there's no mention of the bus depot in Peterborough, but there is in the LTCP. So that's where we currently are.
Thank you for the clarification. As Chair, I will I'll just finally make a comment. I do not believe I am, as Mayor, making a punishment to the community of Peterborough. I would suggest that the decision that the LTCP was not voted on by the representative of Peterborough City Council was the main reason why we are not proceeding with an absolutely fundamental commitment from myself as Mayor and indeed as officers of the Transport Committee to deliver an electrified bus fleet for the people of Peterborough and the surrounding areas. It is a great shame that we can't move forward at the present time. But we will have to revisit it with the due diligence. On this thing, we're going to take a vote that I'm going to have to pull this paper on this occasion. Those in favour? Sadly. Those against? Those abstaining? Okay, so we are unfortunately unable to proceed with the depot for electric buses in Peterborough. And we'll instruct. Yes, well, I'm sure he'll be pleased to hear. ITSO is the next argument. It's approved support contracts for ENCTS. This is actually a transport matter. So if this is a transport matter, we won't be able to take a vote on it. It is a transport matter. I'm sure we can, okay. So this is, the last transport item is the ITSO approved support contract. Tim Bellamy, could you present the report?
Mindful of time, so this item was around the Travel Concessionary Authority, so that's what the combined authority are acting on behalf of the Department for Transport for the purpose of administering the statutory English National Concessionary Travel Scheme for Kensington and Peterborough and its residents. This scheme provides concessionary travel passes to older and disabled residents, allowing them to travel at the moment on off-peak on scheduled bus services across England. Following assessment through the Transport Committee, the recommendation was to go with an external provider, having had an assessment about whether in-house could be progressed. And following a thorough assessment, it was undertaken that this should be delivered externally because internally we didn't have the right appropriate accreditation, the level of technology, capacity or expertise, and the cost of the in-house option was significantly higher and therefore was not value for money. However, going forward, the combined authority will thoroughly examine the potential to deliver such schemes in-house during the bidding planning process. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. I'm just going to suggest that we're probably all happy with this. Anna, if you propose,
And I second. No further comments. Right, we can move to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? Okay, so again, on this one, we have passed it by a majority. The final recommendations are from the Business Board. This is not a transport issue, Councillor Fitzgerald, so if you want to leave. We are remaining core, aren't we? We just... Yeah. 5. Okay, so no one else. Just one final thing. Item 18 is the Business Board recommendations to the Combined Authority. As these recommendations have already been debated in detail and approved by the Business Board on the 4th of September, I propose we move directly to the vote unless anyone objects. Al, on this, you are moving the recommendations. Hopefully you'll support these ones. I am going to be your seconder. So we'll move to the vote on the recommendations. Those in favour? Those against? And no abstentions. I do appreciate your position, I think. Thank you, Al. On that, that was passed by a majority. I am now closing the meeting, and I look forward to catching up with you all at the next board meeting